The time has come once again to speak as witches and wizards do. I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 5, Shadow Work.
Also known as deep introspection. And at this point, we would like to add a disclaimer. Now, this is unusual for us, but sometimes people can take what we're saying as being therapy or something along those lines. So anyway, I just want to say what we're offering here is not in place of therapy. It's not medical advice. We're offering our opinions. And as such, these are up to you to take as you will. It's our opinion. Do with it as you feel fit. As the Buddha said, listen to the teaching. If it works for you according to your life experience, take it and use it. If it doesn't, put it to one side. We're not telling you what to do. We're offering you our views.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm clapping. I like how you brought the Buddha into it because it's true, right? Like we discussed before recording is what you'll find when you're opening up spiritually is that this is intuitive behavior to you. But we're putting that disclaimer on because this is also a official form of therapy. So
Or it can be seen as such. And I mean, what is shadow work but working on the stuff you haven't dealt with, which is exactly how Daniel phrased it before the podcast started recording. And I think that's a really good way of covering what shadow work is, right? It's the side that you'd rather not look at. It's the side you'd like to pretend you don't have, maybe. And it's the side where most of your learning happens. It's something you have to look at in order to grow, to evolve, and to move forward. But typically, that's something you might take to a therapist and say, okay, I've got these stories from my childhood, da da da. But there are different ways of working on it. This is not therapy.
but I will add, it might be actually interesting for 2025 if people actually bring this to therapists when they're doing something.
Much will depend on the therapist's openness and whether they have a religious founding, if you will, because some therapists are also very religious with what they do. So, check in with the person you're working with. Is this something that you think they could handle? If it is, way to go, you got the right therapist for you. And if it isn't, well, okay. We'll just leave that floating there for a minute.
Yeah, because again, our big thing about 2025 is the year of being who you are and truly being who you are. So it
All
can't
of who you
hurt
are.
to, what's that?
All of who you are,
Yes, all
including the
of who you
shadow
are.
side, right?
Right. Well, actually, yeah, because just before we started the call, I was telling Michaela my whole month is basically reflecting on where I've been and where I'm going to go because 2025 is, a year of doing stuff. So those who are helping show other people the way have to be prepared too for it. And I had noted to Michaela that one of the big things I need to do as someone who likes to work in service of others is to honor other people's strength. And so that's one of my failings sometimes is to try to take all the burden to myself and not let the other people carry the burdens they need to carry. I will say, from a humorous perspective, at least for myself, is that I don't necessarily completely not have people bear their burdens. This is not completely true of me, but it is true of me in relation to myself. Like,
Hmm.
we've talked about, who heals the healer.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those healers who don't take help from other people. So, but that's the thing, right? That's not honoring people's strength to be able to return what you've given. So that's
It's
my.
interesting. It's an interesting place that I think a lot of us end up in
Mhm.
is we can put out all the help and all the things that we think people need and the things that people come for. But when it comes to them helping us, that can be a little more tricky. And an example that leaps to mind is last summer I had an accident and my face was a mess. Like I got cuts and yeah, I was really happy I didn't lose any teeth.
Mm,
And people got very upset when they saw me. It was such a mess. And I believe I had a concussion. But
mm,
could you get me to go to the hospital? No, because I used to be a nurse. And I'm
yeah,
not going into a hospital unless I'm, unconscious and you drag me there. So what's that all about, right? Well, part of it is a deep distrust on my part because I know what they're doing. And that's something you find with a lot of nurses, right?
yeah,
But it's an interesting thing that I will find every kind of excuse to say why I don't need to go there, even
mm,
when if I was looking at somebody in my condition, I wouldn't even listen to them. I'd cart them off.
yeah,
And there's that, and I'm aware of that discrepancy, but it's a real thing. And if it happened to me tomorrow, I'd do it again. I'd still refuse to go in,
yeah,
even though I'm kind of walking sideways and can't see straight.
yeah.
I don't advise this for anybody, by the way. That is not what to do, but it's what I did do.
I'm gonna offer this. That advice came too late for me because I too had a similar situation, but I was 13 years old. Oh yeah,
Okay.
I wiped out. My face was bleeding. It was not that far from home, so I had my bike. I put my bike on my shoulders. I walk home, drop my bike, walk into the house, and just my mom was home. I'm just loaded in blood. I'm like, I'm going to take a nap now. But yeah, I was dizzy. I was like, I can't say if I had a concussion or not, but it was like my bell had been rung, but I was bleeding everywhere. Just like,
Yeah, similar.
yeah, yeah, and it's funny because I went to school the next day.
Uh-huh. Well, I kept doing all sorts of
Yeah.
things. Some people requested I didn't have my camera on because my face was such a mess. And it really, I had a coach I spoke to who took one look at me and she burst into tears. And I was like, okay, that's not a good look, is it? And, yeah, it was kind of messed up, but I just kept going. And I had people saying to me, do you want to rest? Do you want to like take today off? And I was just, no, I'm fine. I clearly wasn't fine. But this is something that we do, right? Especially when we're used to helping other people. It's like,
Yes.
no, I don't need help. I'm fine. Let me work with you. And I'm still coaching other people, even though my face looks like it, went through a mincing machine or something. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the funny part of it because like my parents had decided they would they didn't know, like not that they didn't know what to do. If they were really panicked, they would have brought me to the hospital. But because of all the cuts, because I went like across gravel with my face.
Yeah,
But
me too, actually. That's exactly what happened to me.
so they decided we'll put bandages on half of it and we'll just leave the other half exposed to the air because they were arguing on which would leave scarring. Well, I have no scars on my face, so none of it left scarring. I do
Isn't
have
that
scars on my
lucky?
knuckles from it though. Yeah.
Oh, funnily enough, me too. I have scars on my hands from where I tried to save myself and failed miserably. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And my glasses were also trashed,
Mm.
but
Well, I
luckily
wasn't
I
wearing my
had another
glasses, but
pair.
that was yeah. So we have that in common, anyways. But that advice comes too late for me because I've already done that.
Isn't that funny though that we both had the same kind of experience and we both responded the same way, which is no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't let other people do that, right?
No. Oh no, I would have been like, okay, we're going to the hospital. Like if it would have been me,
Uh-huh.
like because I was like everywhere blood. Like it
Yeah, no,
was all just skin
absolutely.
deep, right? It was just really, it was all just skin deep. But yeah, like my bell got rung for
Uh-huh.
sure. I was dizzy. I was ready to pass out, but I was like, I'm just going to bed. I'm good.
So
Yeah.
just listening to what Danielle and I are saying,
Yeah.
here's a great example of the space between how you show up for others, how you
Yeah.
show up for yourself, from the shadow side to the
Hmm.
side that we prefer to put forward, right? And
Hmm.
the importance of bridging the gap between the two. Because I can see for both of us, there's this sort of mismatch of how we look after ourselves compared to how we'll show up
Right.
for others. And then what we expect from others, right? Like we won't do the thing we know we ought to be doing, but we want other people to do it. So there's
Yeah.
definitely a mismatch there. Now, I'm not gonna accept or suggest the word hypocrisy here because it's not that. We're fully aware of what we're doing,
Mhm.
and we're
Yes.
not saying I would do this, I would do that. That's not how either of us approach this. But it is interesting that there's such a big difference between those two sides, right?
Yeah. It's I'm actually very glad this example came up, and because I think, because right, demonstrably, right, we actually went on about our normal business to the horror of others. Because when I went to school the next day too, everyone was like, "What the hell happened to you? And why the hell are you here?"
Right? Yeah, I got that question a lot.
It's like, doesn't hurt today. It's fine. It's good. I'm fine. It's just a scratch. It's no big deal.
Right? And yeah, but the huge discrepancy between what we would do for ourselves and what we do
Right.
for others, that I think is something, we're each going to be exploring that, I would say, as
Yeah.
what does that mean? How does that work out? And how to bridge that gap? Because really, if we're not looking after ourselves, then the foundation to work with others is not as strong as it could be. So we kind of need to work on that in order to
Yeah.
show up better for others.
This is very, 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 very true.
There's our assignment for the week.
Yeah, absolutely. But and just to show you guys listening that it's like if you feel like you if you feel there's stuff you don't want to do and you don't want to talk about because it's not right, well, we just both shared with you something very, very, oppositional to what we would normally recommend other people. So yeah, we got that work to do too. And because one of the big things of shadow work, right, is that it's usually attitudes you've taken given to you by society, or at the very least your personal society, your family, and your small friend group or whatever your friend group. So yeah, we both like, because I'll tell you right now, anyone else in my family would have done the same thing. Like, in fact, I'll give you a story. My brother, he was like, maybe if he was 6 years old, and he still has a huge scar to this day. You can't see it, but on his forearm, Michaela can't see me doing it either. But he's got basically what looks like a big Y scar going down his arm because he fell off a tractor and he got caught on a piece of metal and it cut open his arm. And there was bone exposed and muscle and stuff. And this was like at a family gathering, right? So like everybody was like freaking out, and he was putting on a brave face for everybody at 6 years old. So to give you an idea
Right.
of the cult of the family culture I come from, it's the do for others, but suffer, in silence, and show your strength and show how strong you are, and don't worry about it until you have your time by yourself to do your healing and recuperation.
And how many of us in this space do that? I
Right.
would say probably a great many. We talk a good game, but we don't look after ourselves. That's uh, that's the takeaway, I think, for a lot of people in this realm, because we're so busy trying to help other
Mm-hmm.
people get to where they want to be, whether it's spiritually or, we both work with nutrition as well. So whether it's through that,
Right.
which really is a portal to everything else, it's just another way of approaching the work that needs to be done. But we're so busy doing that that it's kind of inconvenient for us to need some help ourselves. So again,
Yes.
this is definitely a place to work on. And if the listener's recognizing this, and I'm getting that you are,
Mm.
then yeah, here's a place for you to do a little introspection and a little shadow work on, why do I do that? Where did that come from? Where did I learn that my needs didn't count? That's a big question. Where did you learn that? And it's not, here's a clue. It's not necessarily that somebody told you this in as many words or that somebody made you feel wrong for looking after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are it's something you saw other people doing. It's how your family operated, for example, or the kids you hung out with. Everybody had all the bravado and everything, but you got the message probably as a kid that this is how to be. You made that part of your identity and how you show up in the world, and you've just added to that since then. So now it's very difficult to access that part that says, well, actually, no, my face looks like pizza and I really need some help. Um, it's tough to access that. And as we've already said, we're working on this stuff. I'm certainly working on that one. I'm working on standing my ground. I'm working on saying no when I want to say no. And I have to tell you, I've had some great success with that lately, and it feels wonderful. But it takes work, and that's the shadow.
Yeah, yeah. And you brought up a good point, right? Because everything you learn, especially growing up, isn't necessarily because someone told you. Because I can
Mm,
rhyme you off a bunch of things I learned as a kid that no one taught me, and that everyone's kind of confused where I learned it, but because it was my understanding of what people taught me. And I'll give you a big one because everyone in my family, or at least my immediate family, recognizes this one. So, and just to let you know, this was like, the 70s. So, although things were progressing and becoming more open and more available to people, because of my level of sensitivity, like to other people's emotions and stuff like that, and my reactions to it, my parents were afraid I might be gay. So, my mom took it upon herself to, how do I not make him gay? Well, me being someone, I'm like, okay, well, I'm here to learn. Not in those words, but you know what I mean? Like if someone's going to teach me something, I'm going to take time to really learn it, you know? So I became cold and distant. And for a long time, it was hard to get me to do anything family related or anything that, required any kind of, not friendliness, but, a lot of openness and caringness and being group oriented. It kind of solidified that stoic male talks, what we call male toxic masculinity of
toxicity,
the I can do everything, I'm strong, I don't need anyone, my emotions don't matter. I learned the snot out of that lesson because I didn't know what people were, I didn't understand full well the reasons why I was being taught what I was being taught. What the intention was just to reduce my sensitivity. Well, technically, not make me gay, but to reduce my sensitivity was the actual overall desire. But
which is that's a very interesting concept
yeah,
that's needed. And again, I'm glad you pointed out that that was the 70s. But
yeah,
yeah, it's sad to try and reduce somebody's sensitivity.
right,
However, that was then, this is now.
right.
Um,
So, like I said, right, but without being told, because I didn't know what they were, I didn't know whatever the plan was, and I've noticed this multiple times where it's like I kind of took the wrong lesson, but I learned the snot out of it. So I
right.
became cold and stoic, or I became, like you have to do what I tell you to do. You have to listen because that's what it's like to be in charge, and all those terrible lessons. And then I learned, well, you know what? Forget that. I'm just going to go back to being me because this is
Mhm.
draining me. And yeah, so back to the more compassionate, the more listening, leading by example rather than leading by authority, whatever kind of way of doing things, you know?
Yeah. And the
But
thing is, environmentally, you can witness two people talking
right.
and get the lesson from what they're saying. You can see other people's behaviors and make of that what you can at the age you're looking at this. So if you're like 4, your
Mm,
life experience is tiny, which means whatever you're looking at, whatever you're absorbing from the people around you, it can only mean certain things. You don't have a lot of life experience.
right.
So the person who hears what you're saying may sort of look at you and say, well, I never taught you that. I didn't, I never said that.
Right.
Well, here's the news flash for everybody listening. It's not about you. It's about the
Right.
environment that we're each in and what we take from that. And you have no control over what a child makes something mean.
Yeah.
So any parent that's currently doing the whole, oh no, I didn't do this, or I did do that, or I meant this. Okay, that's not really the point. The point is, what did the child make it mean? And now, how can you help them offload that or direct them in their shadow work? Because we all have stuff.
Mm,
You could grow up in a bubble and you would have stuff. That's just straight up how it is. Just like trauma, for example, a definition of trauma, it's not the event. It's not what happened.
right.
It's what you did with what happened. It's what it means to you now. That's trauma. So that's not to discount any events that have occurred. It's not the point, and it's really not the point. Like, let's just put that to one side for a minute. Nobody's arguing the thing didn't happen. Nobody's saying it was okay after all. None of that. that we get very caught up in that, and that's victimhood when you go in that direction, right? You don't have to hang on to, but this was terrible.
Right.
That's not the priority. At this point, it's what are you going to do with it? What are you doing with it right now that's sort of keeping you in the loop? And do you want to get out of that loop and do something different? Again, this is where shadow work comes in, where you're going to look at those things. It's not a re-traumatization and an, oh my God, let's all feel
Right.
terrible.
That's right.
No, it's not that. It's just, okay, what else can it mean? What else can I do with this? What was the lesson? And that's what shadow work's about, is the lesson, it's the growth.
Mm. Yes. And you know what? Just so my parents don't come across as complete monsters, I'm going to share something I learned from them that was also positive. So, you know how people say, well, if you don't spank your kid or whatever, or more euphemistically, don't beat your children, they don't learn respect. Well, like, my parents have never laid a hand on me. There's one or two occasions. The first occasion was, and it's never happened again because for those of you familiar with the Little Rascals, or I think they had another name too,
Okay,
our gang or
Rugrats.
something too. A bunch of little kids, right? There was alfalfa and all that and buckwheat, and well, there was one episode where the guy who was basically the leader of the group, he was going to get spanked, so he put a Bible in his pajamas so that when he got spanked, right? So me and my sister, like my mom did the wait till your dad gets home thing. So we had like 4 or 5 books in our pajamas waiting. Like my dad laughed so hard he couldn't really do it.
Right.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
and the thing is, I wasn't going to go with the your parents are monsters thing because, like I
yeah.
said, it's not about that.
Well, what I was going to say with that is the one of the things my parents did that led to one of the good qualities that I have, and actually everyone in my family has, is that when they treat like one, my dad took care of his family because my grandfather was ill. So he always worked to make sure that because not only to work to do it for us, but for them as well. But both of them, when they went out in public, when we'd see them in public and they would talk with people, they listened, they showed respect, they listened to the person's problem to see what they needed before they would do things to help them. So they actually like why I said like that you can't teach your kids won't learn respect unless you beat them is that I learned respect from people because my parents gave people respect, and that's where I learned to give people respect. So it's like you can learn bad things, but you can also learn very good things, and you don't have to necessarily put punishment on your children to teach them.
Okay, I have to go here.
All
I
right,
have to go here. I was wondering, do I do I? And then three times you've said something that takes me in this place.
all right.
So, anybody who spanks or considers
Mm,
spanking, please stop right away because here's what spanking your child teaches them. It doesn't teach them respect, it teaches them fear. It
mm,
teaches them that the adult who is supposed to be the person caring for them and looking after them is actually a source of pain and hurt. It teaches them that they are not safe at home. And what it also teaches them is the thing that you think you're looking at that's respect, that I hear from people, well, my parents taught me respect and da da da. No, what they taught you was to be a sneaky little sod that runs
yes.
around doing exactly the things that got you into trouble in the first place, but in such a way that you don't get caught. So it actually teaches the child to lie, it teaches them to be sneaky, and it teaches them that hitting is perfectly okay if you're
Yeah.
not happy about something. So you have actually single-handedly, quite literally, with the smacking, you
Mhm.
have literally taught your kid how to do all the reprehensible things that you'd really rather they weren't doing. And hitting them does that. This child has a fragile sense of self, and they have no sense of safety unless they can rely on the adult. So if the
Right.
adult is a source of pain, then that inspires fear. It does not
Mm,
ever inspire respect. I can't, if somebody hit me, do you think I'd respect them?
that's right.
No, I'd probably find a baseball bat to
Yeah.
figure it out with them. But this is not respect. This is you're threatened at this point. And a little child, I can assure you, no matter how bratty they behave, and this is behavior analysis piece right now. Big behaviors mean there's a big problem, right? That child has a problem that needs addressing. So if you smack them, you're just adding to the problem. It's not helping anything. You're not teaching the child what you want them to do instead.
Hmm.
So if you just say, that's wrong, smack, then what have you just given them? They have no tools to do things differently, and
Right.
all they've learned is to hit. So that's a huge one. And whenever I'm working with parents that think that spanking is the way they have to go, I have to deconstruct that and show you exactly what you are doing because the world is tough enough as it is. We don't need to do that to our kids. It doesn't toughen them up, it terrifies them.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's to basically to put a kind of a to sum it up, model the behavior you want your children to do.
Exactly, because
My advice to
they
every
are
parent,
watching you.
yeah, it's my
They are
advice to
watching.
every parent. It's to model the behavior you want because, like, I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and you know, a part of me cringes every time I see them do something I don't want them to do because I know they saw me do it and they feel it's okay to do it around me.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like now not everybody agrees with this
Yeah,
and that's okay. I don't mind.
right.
But as my kids were growing up, my youngest has always been very, very good about not using any kind of bad language. Like he
Hmm.
does not swear. To this day, he does not at all, ever. My eldest wanted to play with some language. Well, I swear. So,
Yeah,
I use language. So, can I tell him in all good conscience, you can't say that? No. So, what I did, even as he was a young teen, was I sat him down and explained the likely consequences of him using that language in different environments. So,
yeah,
I told him where it was okay to do it, which is in front of me and in front of his friends. This is okay. Other adults, especially his dad, no, don't do it there because that's not going to go over well. I also had a very strict rule. You don't ever, ever, ever swear at me, but you can
mm,
swear in front of me. This is a very
right.
different thing.
Yes.
And to this day, we still have that going on. And neither of my kids have ever said anything disrespectful to me. They really haven't.
Mm,
But they're free to use whatever language because I do. So I can't tell them to do what
yeah,
I don't do what I model, right? But at least I can give them the information as to where it's okay
yeah.
to do it. And
Well,
I always used to, here's the funny bit, is I always
mm,
used to have people coming up to me saying, your two boys are so delightful. They're
mm,
polite and they're friendly and, and they're all these things. And it's true, they were. But they should have heard the eldest when he wasn't there.
yeah.
It was
But
pretty
that's
funny. But,
yeah,
it
that's the
worked
thing,
for
right?
us.
But that's the thing, right? When you show like, because children will watch you, what like like I said, whether you gave them instructions or not, they're watching you because they're trying to learn what to do in these situations, especially if it's a situation you never addressed with them before. And
Yep.
it's a situation you addressed them one way and then you behave differently when you actually went out. So you
And
should
that's a big
be,
problem,
yeah. So you should always pretty much be true to yourself, even when you're a parent. Because if you want your
especially
kid,
when you're a parent,
yeah,
I would say. One of the things I work on with a number of parents is their kids with anxiety, because
mm,
so many have anxiety now. It's easier to pick out who doesn't. And the key there is we I've said this before in podcast episodes where we always focus on the child and how the
yeah,
child needs to do things differently. Again, incorrect. That's not what we need to do. What are the parents' coping skills with anxiety provoking situations? What do they do when they're feeling anxious? Do they get mad and yell about it? Do they, get all panic stricken and behave irrationally? Do they talk through things? Like, what do you do when you're anxious? Because your child sees that and that becomes their coping mechanism. So if your kid has a dysfunctional way of handling anxiety, no blame here, but it is coming from you because that's what they see and they're trying it on. They might not be doing it expertly, but the origin is with what they've
right.
seen modeled. And again, no blame because that doesn't help anything. But how can you learn different coping skills so that your child can get them? But it always
Yeah.
starts with the parent.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's almost an aside, like, but ties like, yes, we're talking about shadow work, but like, if you're a parent and you ever want to know, if you're ever lost on how to parent, it's just be yourself. Literally be yourself. Your solutions are unique to you. And remember, your children share your DNA and they're going to share some of your behaviors. So, the stuff that other people put on you that doesn't work for you might work for, like, maybe don't have to use those. I mean, your child is still its own unique creation,
Yep.
but, look at how you are and look at how your co-parent is, because in this day and age, there's all kinds of combinations. So, and look at how you both are, and then see what's showing up in the child so that you can use what you knew would have worked for you with them or what would have worked for your partner with them. Because, right, the combination. So you have to pick and choose between the two of you to see which one works.
And also honesty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with the occasion with the swearing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, honestly, I can't say don't do that, but I can give him the tools to navigate. If that's what he wants to do, then this is how you do that without getting yourself into trouble,
Right.
right? So it was absolutely honest. And I let him carry on with that in front of me because I want to know what he's doing. Like, I want to know where he's at. And are we in a good space or is this getting out of control in some way? Best way to do that is to be open to having that in my environment. But
Yeah.
the condition was his dad couldn't be around because his dad would not tolerate that.
Mm.
So we all have our different things, but I was honest about
Yeah.
what and why, where and when, and just full
Yeah.
disclaimers on that. Another one was when he was 16, same kid, 16, and he said, I want to get a tattoo. And then he looks at me with, a great deal
Mm.
of defiance. Well, okay, I have tattoos. Full
Mm-hmm.
disclaimer.
Yeah.
So am I going to tell him he can't have one? No, because that's not going to work. So what I did was I looked very thoughtful and said, oh, that's interesting. What is it
Mm.
that you want to have on your body for the rest of your life that's so interesting? Like, show it to me.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want to have done?
Mm.
And I got so into the question that he just kind of looked at me with teenage disgust and kind of
Yeah.
stopped off because he didn't actually want one. He was just trying to get a rise
Yeah.
out of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, I was being very honest because I can't, if I've had that, I can't turn and tell him he can't.
Well, that's the thing, because I do that with kids too. It's like, listen, you've seen me do it, you've heard me talk that way. What am I going to tell you? No, I do the same thing, but here's why I would think not to do it right now, would be usually how I approach it. Not that it can never be done and stuff like that, because one of my favorite stories is one of my nephews, when he was 8 years old, I had to go pick him up from school because he was swearing. So they kind of let him out for the day. And he's like, and he goes to me, he says, Uncle Dan, are you mad at me? And I'm like, I swore like a sailor at your age. What am I going to tell you? As at your exact age, I was just as bad. I did just as much swearing as you did, maybe even a little more. Used a lot of offensive language because, where I was, that was the cool thing for 8-year-olds at the time. So it's like you're not going to get me angry. I'm not angry with you. I said you have parents who are probably going to blow up when they hear about it. So it ain't me who's going to be giving you heck for this.
Right. But if you told him when he could do it and when
Yeah.
it's less advisable,
Mm-hmm.
that helps navigate. I mean, mine was in his early teens, but so it was that particular
Yeah.
phase. But again, it's a case of being honest, right? If you're
Yeah.
doing the thing or if you've got the thing, you've done the thing, you can't really turn around and be holier
Right.
than thou and like, no, no, no. So that's part of your own shadow work too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's to help your child
Yes.
navigate
Mm-hmm.
what they're picking up from you because they're getting not only the stuff you want them to get, but also the other stuff that maybe it'd be great if they didn't pay attention to that. And how many videos do we see online now of little kids swearing up a storm?
Oh yeah.
Mine did not do that, gotta say. They did not, because they didn't hear it at that age, but they did hear it when they were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
However, how many times do we see little kids swearing up a storm and the adults are laughing about it?
Mm-hmm.
And now that kid's going to get into trouble when they go to school, and nobody told them why it's not okay to do it there. It is okay here. You
Well,
know what
that's
I
the
mean?
thing.
So that honesty, that little bit of extra ownership needs to come in order to help rather than harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So all that to say is that when you're doing shadow work and you look at stuff and you find problems, what you find problematic within yourself, remember, you weren't always necessarily directly taught it. People who were raising you or people in your environment when you were being raised didn't necessarily say to you, hey, you have to behave this way. It could be something you picked up on your own from watching their behavior. So the people who told it to you, recriminations against them may not work because they might not even have been aware that that's what they were showing you. So your shadow work is not necessarily about blame of other people. Listen, if there's a situation where there is blame to be laid somewhere, by all means, but there's a lot of things that you caught on by yourself that you taught yourself or you understood to be a certain way. And I just adding that on to say that when you're doing your shadow work, look at what your interpretation was of what was given to you because someone may have intended something differently, even if they didn't necessarily show it to you differently.
True. And I'm going to change course just a little with that one because
Yes.
my stance is blame is never appropriate. It's you may be able to say, I learned this because this person did X, and that's legit. However, I honestly believe nobody wakes up in the morning saying, you know what, I'm going to make some really shitty decisions today. You don't do that intentionally. You
Right.
act from the place you're at. And so that person, they're just busy being them. And
Yes.
you picked up on that thing. Now, yeah, I get the whole thing about rough childhoods and what have you. My own was
Mm-hmm.
pretty awful. But at the same time, I've done the work and I can look at what happened and see that, okay, I just happened to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever was there in my stead would have had the same result because it wasn't about me.
Right.
It was them and their problems. I got the brunt, but it's not personal, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's no point in blaming. It wasn't so much done to me as it was done to me. See what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like it wasn't me personally who I am. I had no part in
You're right. Yeah.
making that happen. So blaming that person gives them a power that
Mm-hmm.
they don't deserve, they haven't earned, and they probably don't want. The power is yours to say, okay, that was that. I learned these things from that, some of which have helped me, some of which have gotten in my way. Now, how am I going to deal with this from here on out? But the more you can leave behind the things that caused you harm, if you will, those events that you'd like to, throw a rock at, the more you can leave that behind, the more energy you have for moving forward.
Yes.
And here's the thing, people talk about forgiveness a lot. I
Mm-hmm.
forgive this person, I forgive that person. I'm fascinated by this. Like, what does that mean? What do you do in order to forgive? It's a very popular notion, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I understand what it is. What I do understand is understanding, right? Like if you bring
Mm-hmm.
understanding to that person, to what they did, to how they were, then forgiveness is kind of a moot point because the whole thing loses its power. It just doesn't matter now. I don't know if I've explained that very well because it's a tricky concept, but
But it's a great
forgiveness
point.
implies, you know, an active giving of something, and I don't think it's warranted. Like if you
Well,
just
okay,
understand,
I'll try this. So
okay,
when something bad happens to you,
hmm,
part of you wants to know why,
yes,
so that in the future you can avoid having that situation happen to you again. So what I think you're trying to say is that you don't need to forgive to actually achieve what you want to achieve by forgiving. Like commonly we're told to forgive because you forgive for yourself, not for the other person. That forgiveness lets you move on. But it's not so much that we're looking to forgive, is that we're looking to understand the situation we were in so that we can come up with solutions to avoid it or at least handle it better in the future. That's the basics, the core of
yeah,
that emotional reaction. So
yeah.
you
The
don't
thing
actually have
is,
to forgive to achieve all those things. You just need to understand the situation. You need to know why it happened. You need to know if you were the direct cause with someone else. Is there anything you could have done in that situation?
well, even if there isn't, it's
Right.
like if you're a kid and you're in an
Yeah.
abusive situation, there's nothing you can do to change that other than maybe go hide at the appropriate
Right.
moments.
But
Even
that's
that
also
just puts
empowering,
something
right?
off.
But it's empowering to know that you did nothing to provoke it.
It
So,
is, and
right.
that's my point.
Yeah.
It is empowering to know that it's not personal.
Right.
You couldn't have done anything about that. You were simply there. So, what you can do now, best value, if
Mhm.
you like, is to look at it and say, what did I learn from that? I don't mean what lesson did I learn? It's
Yeah.
more like personal example is from my childhood. I learned very early on to read people's behavior so that I could predict pretty accurately, for the most part,
Hmm.
what they were going to be doing next,
Right.
and that helped to keep me safe. So I used that learning of behavior in a curious way as we moved around the planet to sort of
Hmm.
see, okay, why do these people do this and why does that look like that? And what
Right.
does this mean? And more prediction, a broader scope. And now fast forward to today, and I'm pretty good with behavior. I gotta say, I've spent an entire life working on this thing. The foundation started with the need to be safe. But the
Hmm.
learning that I've had is huge because I can effectively help a lot of people change their
Yeah.
behaviors from what they're doing that doesn't work to what they'd rather do that will work, right? So I have a gift that came to
Right.
me through that. So can I say, yay, I'm so grateful, and I forgive all the things? No, all of
Right.
that's twaddle. But I can say, I understand as best I can what
Mm.
happened and that I don't have to feel attached to that because it wasn't about me. Meanwhile, it set me off on a path of
Hmm.
deep learning that's been really valuable.
Yes.
So now I'm going to focus on that. Forgiveness doesn't really come into it because
Well,
there's
that's right.
understanding. I
That's
don't
the thing.
need both.
That's what I was going to say. Like, bringing up forgiveness is actually a very good thing because, yeah, it's not about forgiveness from your perspective, from their perspective. It's about, do you understand the situation that you went through? Because you need to understand the things that happened to you. Could you have done something? Did it matter if it was you? Like I said, like, one of the things I learned with my parents was it wasn't personal. They were
Right.
either mad at someone else or they were mad with each other or they were mad at themselves for something. And I just happened to be in the room.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. So forgiveness in that situation isn't appropriate, honestly. I
Right.
mean, the people who were busy doing their own thing and you happen to be there, are they aware that they need forgiveness even? Do they need forgiveness? Like it probably isn't even on their radar. And how many times do you see sort of memes and what have you saying, learn to forgive even though, they don't ask for forgiveness, or even though you learn to accept the apology that's never given, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, 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 no. You are throwing your energy in the wrong direction.
Right.
The reason there's a disconnect there is because they're not seeing it through your eyes. They don't see it your way. They
Right.
probably don't even remember three-quarters of what you're carrying right now. That's the thing. It was a
Yeah.
big deal to you because you're a little kid making it mean a whole
Hmm.
heap of things. To those adults, they didn't even notice probably more than half of it, right? Like three-quarters of that. So offering them your forgiveness is kind of like, really? What? Why? What did I do for that? It's a mismatch. Whereas if you can understand, it helps you to move on,
Hmm.
and they have their own journey. They have their
Right.
own stuff to work with. If it's something that you can talk about because each of you are prepared to,
Hmm.
okay, cool, that's a different direction to go in. But it's not necessary.
Right.
You don't have to do that in order to do your own work on your own stuff.
Yeah. And you know what? This probably goes on a list of a few things that people weren't expecting to hear about from this podcast, and that forgiveness is unnecessary.
Yeah, and it's
Add
an
that to your list if you're keeping a
unpopular
list.
opinion.
Yeah.
Opinion, but we spout this stuff without ever actually looking at, well, what do you mean by that? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how do you forgive somebody? How do you do that in an action? What is it? I mean, where do you find it? Where do you keep it? What do you do with it? Nobody
Yeah.
can define this for me in a way that works. It's this abstract concept that's thrown out there. Oh, you have to forgive this, and You
Mm.
must be forgiving. It'll give you peace of mind. Well, actually, no, it's going to keep me up all night while I try and figure out what the hell everybody's talking.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
like, what is that?
So again, right? The whole thing for 2025, right? Part of it is it's not what
Mhm.
you think it is.
Exactly.
Forgiveness is not what you think it is. Forgiveness is not moving on because you can't move on until you have a solution for yourself to what to do in that situation again, is
And
basically what's
just,
happening.
you learn the thing,
Right.
right? Because we are doomed to repeat behavior loops in all sorts of forms until we learn the lesson. What is the lesson? The lesson is the thing that keeps happening that causes the loop to
Hmm.
occur again,
Right.
right? There is a point in this behavior loop where you could break that chain. You just have to see it and be willing to do it. And there's the work. But it's that's just going to keep on happening, right? There's no need for forgiveness there. There's a need for understanding, though, and a need for acceptance. So there's another piece that I think forgiveness kind of doesn't really address. Can you just accept that the people you're looking at that you want to blame and throw rocks at, just accept that it is what it is. That's what happened, and it's not about you. And now you have some stuff that you can understand and work through. Because every time you learn a lesson and you break that chain, you've just progressed in another area. Other things open up, and now you've got more you can explore because you're not busy dragging around all this freaking baggage from when you were a kid.
Right.
Like, put it down for crying out loud. But forgiveness, I don't understand this thing.
Yeah. You know,
It's not adequately explained ever. It's used, it's like laziness. It's a tool that people use to beat other people up with. You have to be forgiving. You're not a good person if you don't have forgiveness. What? Like, I don't understand. Forgiveness also implies judgment, right?
mhm.
You have to have been judging somebody in order to need to forgive them. Well, here's the deal. How about you don't judge? If you seek to
Yeah.
understand, you bring curiosity to, okay, what was going on there? You don't need to judge. If you don't need to judge, there's nothing to forgive, right?
Right.
So put that on your list of things you didn't expect to hear.
Mm. You know, and I want people to remember that because there's a difference between being judged and being understood. I didn't
Massive.
before I didn't make the distinction because people would say to me, "Oh, I don't want to go there. I'll be judged." I'm like, people have to make an assessment of who you are as a person before deciding whether or not they want to approach you, whether it's a right or wrong assessment. But you're right. But the wording is better. People seek to understand you, not to judge you. And
Right.
also, before we move on, so Michaela's point about things being a cycle, and every time you make a mistake, you repeat the cycle over and over again. I wanted to give you something to remember this by. For those of you who have seen the movie Groundhog's Day, now
Mm-hmm.
it was also a book. And if I might not have the exact number, but it's close to this number. It was a very, very large number. That book, that day repeats itself. He basically lives for over 10,000 years before he breaks the cycle. He lives basically for 10,000 years in that same day,
Wow. And
or
some
at least
people
a
live their
thousand years or something
lives,
like that. But the
some people
point is,
do live their life that way.
yeah, the point being is that it took him a long time to break that cycle until he figured out what broke that time loop. The thing he didn't understand. It took him, yeah. Like even if I was wrong, and it's like 1,000 years. That's still a heck of a long time. That's a lot of lifespans. Like he went through a lot of lifetimes trying to figure out how to get out of that day. So I just
Right.
want you guys to remember that when you think about every time a cycle repeats itself, it's like the am I going to do this for 10,000 years? Like
Well,
over and over and over.
whenever you catch yourself saying something like, why does this always happen to me? Okay. Wooga, wooga. This is like, wave the red flags. That's your cue. Okay. Why don't you answer your question? Why does that always happen to you? What are you doing that keeps it going? And an example so that you got something to hang it on here is when you go to somebody's house for Thanksgiving, for example, and you are ready for this argument because you always have this argument with Uncle Joe after he's had 3 beers or whatever it is, right? So you have the whole scenario set up in your head And you know what you're going to say, and then he's going to say this, and then I'm going to say that. Okay, there's your loop right there. So the way you can flip
Mhm.
that script is don't say what you normally say. Say something completely different so that Uncle Joe cannot respond in that way because you didn't give him the cue.
That's
Because
right.
guess what? You're playing it out in your head. Uncle Joe's playing it out in his head. You're not the only one having this conversation. So, and before you even meet up, you can plan what are you going to say differently because you know exactly how it's going to go otherwise. There's a very simple, I didn't say easy, I said simple, a very
Yeah.
simple loop that you can affect. And I've done this with clients and had them go to the difficult family members and change the script on them. And it's so funny actually because the family members like, wait, what? Uh, and they have to scramble to think of what to
Yep.
do now because you didn't follow the script. But that's how you start to break loops. Some of them are more complex, some of them are as straightforward as that. But learn your part, accept that you have a part, and then decide what you want to do with that power because you do have the power to change it. You
Yep.
just have to get out of the whole poor me. Why does this always happen to me? I can't help it. It's not me, it's them. If you have that dialogue going on, then you dug yourself a nice big trench and you're currently sitting on your ass in a pile of
Mm.
mud. So you could get up and change that, or you can stay sitting there.
Yep. So there you go. You got your foundation of your shadow work.
That is definitely a foundation for shadow work.
Yeah. It's the don't worry about the people involved, worry about your reaction to the people involved, how you respond to it,
What are you going to do now?
and then what are you going to do after you? Because you know what? Recovering from something that happened to you is not the only thing. Because you can recover, but if you have no plan beyond your recovery, you fall back. You know, in the industry we're in, that's a big one. People can people have lost over their lifespans like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but keep falling back into the trap. And I tell people like, okay, you have a goal. We'll have a goal for when you've achieved your goal because once you've achieved your
Mhm.
goal, right, it's easy to go into crisis mode. Your crisis mode will give you all the resources you need to get out of your crisis. But once you're out of your crisis, it assumes everything can go back to normal. So all the willpower you had, all the energy you had, all the drive you had to do whatever it is you wanted to do, okay, well, let's go reset back to normal. And then you fall back into old patterns again. So you do need something for what you're going to do going forward with your recovery.
And you need to be prepared for the fact that that is going to rear up and bite you. Like at
Yeah.
that exact moment where you think you've made it,
Mm-hmm.
that's where it gets difficult sometimes. One of my clients hit her goal weight 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so before the program was even finished with her, and she said, oh, I achieved my weight, but I think I should lose another 5 pounds. And my antennae went off, and I was like, interesting, why? And this particular client, she's a former power lifter.
Okay.
So she's used to getting ready for competitions and so on. Okay, so I'm aware of this. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, when we did some digging and found that that extra 5 pounds that she would lose is so that when she celebrates having achieved her goal and lets all the foods and things
Mm-hmm.
slip back in that she had deprived herself
Mm-hmm.
of, not with me, but previously, this is the old story. She
Mm-hmm.
would have that sort of cushion that she could bounce back another 5 pounds, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, yeah, but you're not going to do that this time. You don't need to because you're not being deprived. You're choosing what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. So what now? And she just kind of sat there and looked at me with slightly open mouth and big eyes and was
Yeah.
like, uh, I don't know. And we had some work to do then to set up
Yep.
what is it going to look like now? But all kinds of old stories were coming up from her about, well, now I've achieved this, I'm going to start eating cake. Or now I've achieved
Right.
this, I'm going to, she had one day where, oh, I worked really hard today, so I'm going to have sweet potato fries tonight. I'm like, okay, where's the connection? And,
Mm-hmm.
and she's like, you're right. Where is the connection? I don't know. That doesn't make sense. And we kind of explored that. So all these old stories were coming up to pull her back into, okay, let's put the weight back on now so that you can lose it again. Here's your loop. This is the loop. Exactly.
Yep.
So that's the perfect place for her to break that loop is, okay, I've achieved my goal, which I've done before, but I've achieved it differently. And now I'm going to maintain it.
Right.
Ooh, now we're stepping out of that loop, right?
Hmm.
And she's in control of that. Nobody else is. So she might have been given faulty information before. She may have done all kinds of things that weren't great for her health, but got the right number on the scale. All of that is something to recognize, understand, let it go. What are you going to do from here? That's the forward thinking.
Yeah. It brings me down into, I've actually been doing this for the last year or so with my clients. When they say, well, I want to lose weight, I'm like, okay, why?
Hmm.
Well, I want to be healthy. Why? I want to do shadow work. Why? Because like I say, it's easy to be fat and lazy. It's the easiest thing in the world. Grab some food, get your hit, the whatever it is, the hormone that gives you your feeling, dopamine or whatever, serotonin,
Hmm.
whichever one is that gets tripped off. And it's like, okay, there's your happiness. So if you're doing it to be happy, well, there you go. You already have your method of getting happy. So that can't be it. That can't be your only thing. Now, whether you're looking for lasting happiness or whether you're looking for a genuine happiness, that's different, right? That's why the alcoholic decides to stop being an alcoholic because the alcohol, although it's giving them the chemical response they want, it's not engaging the whole system of satisfaction.
Right. And it's also, you need to be clear on the why that you keep
Mhm.
asking. You need to be clear about that because how many people have you had come to you
Mhm.
saying, I want to lose weight? And when you dig down, actually, it's not about the weight at all.
That's right.
And this client who just reached her goal weight, she didn't come for the weight loss.
Mhm.
She came because she got a lot of aches and pains.
Right.
And she had pain every morning. And she'd heard that I was coaching a thing that could
Mhm.
help her not have that. Well, she hasn't had aches and pains for a while now. As she was approaching this goal weight that became a goal after she
Mhm.
started, right? But she thought weight loss was a big deal.
Mhm.
And it ended up not being a big deal at all. It was a side effect. Wow, what
Right.
a concept. So it's a learning experience, right? She now knows something that even through all these years of cycling through different programs to make weight so she could do a competition, etc., she could walk the talk, but she didn't
Mhm.
understand
Right.
what she was doing or why, right? Like she didn't have that foundational piece that she does have now. So she's far more empowered now than she ever
Mhm.
was before.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's breaking that loop, getting that information
yeah.
and the understanding.
And this is the key to all of it. It's the like, right? Again, given what we work in, that is the secret to everything. It's the okay, why, and what are you going to do when you're done? Like even we're talking about shadow work, but okay, you've worked, you've dealt with your shadow. Now what? If you're going to go back to your same lifestyle, what was the point in doing the work? Like, I had a client, oh, I want to lose weight. Why? Well, I don't feel beautiful. I'm like, you're married, you have kids, you have everyone loves you, you have the respect of your community. What's losing weight going to give you? Like, what's it going to do to you? You, like you're already all these things that people usually lose weight for. Like, you already have all those things you're looking for. So why do you want to lose weight? Like, and if you say it's for you, well, then what are you going to do with it moving forward? Because all the normal motivators you already have those. You've already achieved them. You have them. You're not in danger of losing them just because you're overweight. So it's like, well, where are you going to go from here? What are you going to do with it? And it's very like, but that's another thing, right? Like it sounds like what I'm saying sounds like, well, if the person has everything, why would they want to work? Well, I don't know. They're the ones who have that emptiness that is driving them to lose weight, or that feeling to lose weight. So they must be missing something, that's not obvious.
There's a story somewhere, or
Yeah.
it can be, for a lot of my clients, it's a health thing, actually. Like
Yeah.
they have aches and pains or they have
Mhm.
autoimmune condition. I have one client that was on anti-anxiety meds for 13 years. Her kid did not know who his mom was without this medication.
Right.
She's now off it. She was weaned off by her doctor. This was
Mhm.
not something I recommended, nor
Mhm.
did I facilitate it. Her doctor did, based
Hmm.
on the improvements that she'd
Right.
made in all areas of her life with the coaching that we're doing. Weight, funnily enough, is the slowest thing to change for her
Hmm.
because there's a bunch of other things at play, right?
Right.
But the fact that her kid now sees her not on medication for the first time in his teenage life, this
Hmm.
is wild. He's learning a whole new mom. He's
Yes.
learning a whole new bunch of things about who she really is when she's
Hmm.
not on medication and and how life can be, right? And also how to handle it.
Right.
So weight and model, that's so much more powerful than losing weight, right?
Hmm.
Weight is the side effect. But it depends too on who you attract in these situations. And we each attract people for different reasons, right?
Yeah.
They come to us for different things. Um, and I seem to get a lot of people with health issues come my
Mm.
way, which is great because it's really easy to measure, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not hard to measure and it's way more satisfying than a scale. Um, but yeah, having something to work to is
Yes.
always key. You got to look forwards. We spend so much time looking backwards at, well, that person said I was fat when I was 13,
Mm.
and so da 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 da. And it's like, yeah, but we could move past that now. Why don't you just let it go? And what else do you have that you want to work on? Or, what do you want to be? Where do you want to go to? Like with the parenting we mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
a lot of people who want to spank their kids because they think it's the way to go, they themselves were hit.
Hmm.
Okay, now we are going to make that okay. We're going to have lots of reasons why it was fine, because to not do that calls into question your parents' abilities, right?
Right.
And we don't want to do that. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. So, and the parents, of course, they're not going to approve of you saying, "Well, I'm not going to spank my child," because they also feel that you're calling their parenting into question.
Hmm.
So there's a lot at play there, right? There's a lot of different things, but you can be the person that breaks that loop. And again, forgiveness. I'm pretty sure the parents who started the thing in this particular
Hmm.
example, they don't think they need forgiveness. They thought they were doing a perfect job, and they probably were told that in parenting books at the time,
Yeah.
right? Spare the rod, spoil the child kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So they did what they thought was accurate. They thought that was a good move. You know better, so don't do it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very simple. But to blame them, to be like, well, they did this thing. Okay, that was their best decision. What's yours? Let's look
Yeah.
forward at what we want, not backwards at what we had. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And you know what? Here's the thing too. If you don't have a role model because things behind you, things looking back were that rough, if you don't have a good role model, here's your opportunity to wing it and figure
Hmm.
it out. And it's going to look interesting.
Yeah.
But you don't have to repeat cycles. This is
Yeah.
not necessary.
Hmm. It's funny, because as you're saying it, it reminds me of once you move on and you settle what you needed to settle, forgiveness doesn't even enter your mind, other than
Like
people told you to forgive people. It's like I don't need to forgive them, and if they want forgiveness from me, they can come ask for it. But I'm fine now because I dealt with what I needed to deal with.
precisely. There is no need for forgiveness,
Right.
even if you can define it,
Hmm.
because it's just there's nothing to forgive. Literally, it's lost its power, it's gone. So if unless you want to rehash it and make it mean
Hmm.
something again, it's gone, it's done. There's nothing to forgive. So I don't think forgiveness is necessarily your best path, honestly. It's I can think of a number of people in my life, if I try hard enough, I can think
Hmm.
of a number of people that, I could be pointing the finger at and throwing rocks at and stuff. But why would I want to do that? It's just no point. It doesn't alter anything, except it uses my energy in a wasteful way. So, just if when you understand it and you really have come to an understanding for yourself, you'll find it just melts away. It
Yeah.
just goes. There's no emotional connection to this thing anymore. And it's amazing how that works because when it
Well,
does,
that's yeah.
all that energy is freed up And now you got more things you can look at and work on. And that's what we're here for is evolution. We're here to keep going, to keep changing, and to keep discovering. And so when you do your shadow work, newsflash is there's more shadow work right there. And then there'll be some more. And after you finish that, there's extra because we have layers. We're complicated beings. So there's always work to do. You're never going to hit a point where it's like, okay, that box is ticked, I'm done. No, you just shoveled a load so you could see what was underneath. Now
Yeah.
keep going.
Yep. It's yeah. I'd almost say you have to figure out why you want to do your shadow work. You have to have a plan for when your shadow work is done, for what are you going to do with, the results of your shadow work. It's like I don't know if a comparison is needed, but what the heck? I'll throw it in because in case someone needs it to help them further down the road. Like one of the big issues with people taking up exercise is why are you exercising? And I don't mean like that, like not just in the broad sense, but like to achieve, like you need for exercise to be its most effective, you need to be training for something or towards a goal you're trying to do. Like if you say, "Oh, I want to get healthier," so then you go to the gym and you start lifting weights. Okay, well you can lift things now, but it doesn't give you like say it doesn't necessarily enhance your mobility. In fact, it can actually rob you of some mobility because it had one time I was working on it and it actually did. I was less flexible working out than I was being lazy. So I was like, okay, this isn't working for me. But like anyone, like if you're training for as a boxer, you're training for a fight, you're going to train your stamina. But you're going to like you could go for a long run for your stamina, but that's not the stamina you need in a fight. You need the stamina where you do quick movements, and switch positions very quickly. So your run is not just going to be a straight run. It's going to be stop, drop, do something else. Like, what do you call it? There's a name for that kind of exercise. Like you'll run, you'll drop, do push-ups, maybe some sit-ups, get up, run again, drop it. But you have to know what you're trying to achieve with yourself, with your health, before you can even decide on your exercise, before your brain really gets involved in the exercise. Because otherwise, it's just you're doing busy work, and your brain's like, "Why are we doing this busy work?" Like, yes, we know theoretically it's to be healthier, but what are we getting out of this extra work that we didn't want to do in the first place?
Yeah, in what way?
Yeah.
In what way are you being healthier? Absolutely. I mean, that is a huge thing. What are you here to gain from it? And when I lived in Asia, I knew some bodybuilders, and holy smokes, they couldn't brush their own teeth because the biceps were too big to
Right.
fold the arm up. And there was a woman who she was on holiday in China, and this woman was a marathon runner. And true story, the
Mm-hmm.
washrooms in China tend to be, especially rural, they tend to be like a brick hut, and then you've got a hole in the ground, and that's you squat to do your thing.
Right.
This woman couldn't squat. She literally had to have two people go in with her. Think of the level of embarrassment here, right? She had to have two people go in with her so they could hold her, one either side, to lower her down so she could do her thing because she could not squat. She didn't practice that way. She
Mm-hmm.
ran, she could run for miles, but blow me down, she couldn't squat to use a toilet. Like, that's okay. We missed a feature here in workout. So
Yeah.
knowing why you're doing what you're doing but also having a broader perspective
Yeah.
of what else might you need that's not obvious is a really good thing to consider as well. And that's in all aspects of life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you're working on shadow work, what else, what other aspects are there? If you're sitting on a chair and you're looking forward, you got one view. If you turn your chair to the side, you got a different view, but you're still in the same chair. What does that look like? Turn
Yeah.
again, turn again, turn again. There's all these different angles. Have you taken care of them? Are you looking at them? Is there a particular one that you're avoiding?
Mm.
Because that's the one you need to go to next, right?
Yes. The one you're avoiding is the one that really needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
always the way, the thing that you're really reluctant about, that's your biggest deal right there. That's the resistance that tells you there's something juicy right behind this door. Just open the door.
yeah. It's funny because we almost didn't need the disclaimer at the beginning of this episode because all we're doing is really talking about why would you do shadow work and what's the
Well,
value of shadow work, but we didn't really step into the therapeutic part of how to do shadow work.
well,
Still, though, it's always good to do it because there's always someone in the world. And I'm sure at some point this podcast will have more relevance in the world, and it's going to need that kind of protection of a disclaimer.
Well, yeah, as you have said, and I think I've said it as well in different ways, you got to know why you're doing a thing. What are you getting into? And are you really prepared for your part to be played? Because it's not all external, right? It's not a project that you have spread out in front of you on your desk. This is about you, actually. This is where you come in. It's your work. So what are you prepared to
Yeah.
accept? What are you prepared to change? And when? Like, what does that look like? Can you accept certain things about yourself that might be less than stellar? You know,
Yeah.
we all have things that, well, we'd maybe rather not admit to, and maybe we don't even admit it to ourselves. But of course you have it. If you can't be perfect, we've said previously, there's no such thing as perfection. So what are your difficult places? What are the things you'd rather people didn't know or you wouldn't have to look at? Because for the listener, that's the stuff that you dive into. If you're on your therapist's couch, they're going to ask you all kinds of questions. And by the way, it's not really a couch, it's a chair. But anyway, you're in your therapist's room and they're asking you questions. They don't want to know superficial stuff. They want to know what's really going on underneath. Hopefully they do. Anyway, if you've got a good therapist, they want to know that. So these are questions you can ask yourself. These are questions. Also, just check in. Am I ready to look at that?
Hmm.
Do I want to look at that? Do I feel like I'm prepared to accept my responsibility for that? Not blame. There's never blame. Blame is an artificial construct and it's nonsense. But responsibility is where your power is. So are you able to look at that thing and say, okay, yep, I was there, I did that thing. Now, what am I going to do differently? There's your shadow work.
Yeah. That goes back to what I said near the beginning when I said that although my parents tried some things, I also bore the responsibility of I learned the hell out of things that I wasn't taught, that it wasn't intended to know or intended to learn. I just took it myself and ran with it and brought it to an exaggerated degree. So just to
You
bring
course
back the
corrected.
responsibility. So I eventually was like, hey, as angry as I was with my parents, it was like I did this to myself too. I took what they were trying to teach me and I went to, extreme with it. And it wasn't something they told me to do. I did it on my own, figuring that'll be the good way of doing it, but that was my mistake. Yes, I was a kid, but still, that carried on into up into my early adulthood, whereas like people would try to introduce me to something and I go, okay, I'm gonna learn the shit out of that thing. I am going to do the best I can do. And it's like oof, maybe I shouldn't have learned that. But that was me making a decision on top of it. So
Well, it's also your path, right?
yeah.
That's how you show up and it's how you operate in the world. And so people don't know that about you. They're not going to
Hmm.
tailor how they show up to cover that.
Right.
That's not how people work. So, when you're very sensitive, and I've always been extremely sensitive,
Right.
and boy, that's a tough place to be when you're a
Hmm.
kid. Oof, you get trampled on left, right, and center. But it's what you do with that later that
Yes.
is your power. That's where your strength is. You can't do anything at the time, but it's where you go afterwards that's what you can handle. And we course correct. We all go
Yeah.
through this stuff. What do teenagers do? They swing left and right and up and
Mhm.
down, and they're all over the place. They are a walking hot mess. Why are they a walking hot mess? And by the way, I love teenagers.
Yeah.
As a species, I think they're a riot. But why are
Yep.
teenagers a hot mess? Because they're trying on adulthood. They're
Yes.
trying on all the different personas and different aspects, and they're swinging too far in one direction and then the other because they don't know where to land yet. And they're learning it. They're adults in training.
Yep.
They are adults in training. So when a teenager is all over the place and they probably can't stand themselves half the time because there's so much going on, right? But they're
Yes.
figuring out what of all the information I have is my path and what is everybody else's and how am I showing up? And some kids fare better than others at this stage. And some of that will depend on the parenting they're given, and
Yeah.
some of that will depend on how they can receive it.
Hmm.
See, we all have our roles.
Yes.
And so figuring out who's got what blame where when is immaterial because it's different depending on your path. So, you know,
Right. And the only thing you can do is work on yourself.
yeah,
Someone can
absolutely.
ask you for help, but you can only do work for yourself.
And there's your responsibility, right? Like that's it. You got to show up for yourself. Otherwise, refer to a previous episode we did about victimhood,
Yes.
because that's where you live if you're not prepared to do the shadow work and you're not prepared to show up. So I guess the disclaimer at the beginning is more about be prepared to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel triggered, which is a very modern way of looking at things, but if you feel that button has been pushed, well, it's not the end of the world. It's something for you to look at and say, well, that's interesting. What's so big about that? And typically, it's something that you've started as a child. You made an event mean something and you added to it since then, on and on and on. So that by the time you're an adult, somebody pushes that button, you get the whole caboodle for the last 40 years or whatever it is. All of it comes up, which is why the reactions are so big. And that means, okay, this is a place I can do some work, right? The trigger itself, it's a very modern and bloody annoying thing that people figure I'm upset, therefore, everybody else has to stop what they're doing, and we all have to pay attention to the fact that I'm upset about something.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could grow something and not make it everybody else's issue, but
Yeah.
look at it for yourself and be like, okay, that really got me going. Why? I spoke to somebody the other day who triggered the blue blazes out of me left, right, and center. And I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Why am I having such a big reaction?
Yeah.
And it was fascinating to me. And I needed to be quiet and process this some because it's not the other person's responsibility. They're showing up as them. I'm having a big response to that. So this is interesting now. Why? Where's that coming from? And you know what? Is there a loop there? Like, where do I need to begin on this? So interesting. So it's an opportunity, right? The
Yeah.
other person doesn't have to stop what they're doing or stop what they're saying. It's not my business to tell them that. They do them, and I figure out my path.
Yeah. Well, because this actually something came across my mind a couple of days ago, but I had noticed over the years, right? Like I can't tell everyone what to do, and I don't want to tell everyone what to do. That's a lot of responsibility to make sure everyone does what I want them to do.
Right?
And so I
Exhausting.
started like because I was having reactions like you said, with someone like, why am I so triggered by this person? So then I'm like, okay, why is this triggering me? And does it make sense that this is triggering me? So I'd sit there and I'd take a second to observe the person. I'm going, okay, there's no reason for me to be triggered just because I don't like something they're doing. They're not doing any harm to anyone. They're not doing anything bad. So why is this triggering me? Yes, I know it goes against certain aesthetics or whatever that I have. But what I found is exploring that a bunch of times. I now have this reflex where if I see someone that triggers me, the first thing my brain does is go, okay, what do they have that you actually like or that you can see in them, that gives you that common ground. It's now become like an instinct to react that way when I see something like that.
That's a very cool response. I like it.
Mm.
My go-to is I look at them and think to myself, typically, I think,
Yeah.
what are you doing that reflects in me, like that
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
as well,
Hmm.
that I don't like, right? So maybe that person is, oh, I don't know, talkative and seems like they're being bossy because I've been accused of both of those, right? So maybe they come across like that. And then
Hmm.
I'm thinking, well, I don't like that in that person. Why? Is it because people say I have it? Like
That's
where
what I was going to say, right? You hate in others what you hate in yourself. And
exactly. And that's what I like to look at is it's a question first. Is that something I do,
yeah.
or is that something that I have done that I don't like? Because it's not really about the person themselves, right?
Hmm.
And if they're saying something that you object to, well, okay, they can do that. So why would it be so triggering? Hmm, it's
Yeah.
sparking something in you that you're trying to sit on.
Yeah.
And so that's a great place to look. There's some shadow, there's some very easy to access shadow work right
Yeah.
there. Instead of allowing yourself to go with the whole, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, and that person's done this, and that person says that. You could do that and you could yell like everybody else is doing right now. Or you could look at it and say, interesting. Now, why is that bothering me? Do I
Yeah.
do that? Or did somebody in my past do that I'm relating this to? Because some of our triggers aren't about the person in front of you, they're about the person behind you.
Yeah.
So is it that? Discovering those connections can help you diffuse something that's otherwise going to have you losing sleep while you win arguments overnight, right? You have
Yeah.
those, I would have said this, and then I'd have
Yeah.
said that, and then I should have.
Hmm.
We go down those loops, and it's like, what was that? You just
Yeah.
wasted a whole ton of energy and sleep and whatever else. And this person has no idea. So you're not affecting them in any way. The only person who's suffering here is you. Why are you choosing that? Let's look at it instead and sort of say, okay, why? Why was that annoying? Why did I get rankled with this particular thing?
Yeah.
Or why does just looking at that person wind me up? What is it?
Yeah. That's actually, a whole world will open up to you, when you do that kind of shadow work. Because
Yep.
it's like even I've been seeing videos lately of whether or not love languages is a real thing or not. The idea is that, whatever your love language is the opposite of your behavior, your bad behavior, kind of a thing. Like if you don't like hanging out with people, then how did that word out? If you think people don't do things for you, or I'm not wording that right. Anyways, it's the opposite of how the person behaves because they don't like that stuff about themselves. So their love language is to do those things that they don't like about themselves for other people, or they feel
Hmm,
they're deprived of. Kind of the opposite of how they present themselves.
interesting. I'm gonna have to consider that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put that
Or
on my.
it basically
I'll.
breaks down to what you won't allow yourself to have, you'll do for other people.
I'm putting that on my to consider list. I gotta
Yeah.
meditate on that one. It sounds very interesting,
Yeah. Or
plausible.
what you won't allow people to do for you, you want people to do for you.
And I wonder too if it's something that if you want to punish the other person, you
Mm,
withhold your own love
that's
language,
right. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so if my love language is words and, expression of love in that way, then if I want to punish the other
Mm.
person, I'm going to not say any of it, right? And that might not even be their love language, so they
No,
wouldn't
it might not
notice.
be.
So they
But that's
wouldn't
the thing, right?
notice, right?
Right.
But it's significant to us. And I think that is an excellent example, actually, of how things matter to us that we think
Yeah.
matter to the other person, and it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
If my love language is words and
Mm.
yours is gifts,
Yeah.
right? If I don't say all the mushy things,
Hmm.
you're not going to notice, you don't care,
That's right.
right? But I'm going to
Yeah.
notice. I'm going to think it's terribly important. Now, you, on
Yeah.
the other hand, gifts are your thing. So if you stop giving gifts, right, like the
Yeah.
weekly flowers don't arrive anymore or
Hmm.
something like that, I, who don't have that language, might not even notice,
That's
right?
right.
And meanwhile, you're having this whole event going on over
Hmm.
there about the gifts and the not, and nobody else notices, right? Because it's party in your own head. It's
Yeah.
you having that experience. Extend that out to all the other things that go on in our lives, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is our experience, right? We think that all the stuff going on
Yeah.
inside us is affecting other people. Totally isn't. It totally isn't.
Yeah.
And nor do you want it to. And nor can it, right? You cannot make another person like you. You cannot make another person hate you. It is always their choice. You can try, you can provoke, and you
Right.
can do whatever, but you have no control over how that person
Right.
responds to you. So give it up. Look at your control, which is you, and
Hmm.
then work on that. because the whole thing, the I said this and they said that and whatever else, it's you. You're having a one person show.
Mm.
So make it a better script. Like, come
Yeah.
on, play with it a little.
It makes me think of I hear this online a bunch because I listen to a lot of relationship stuff, and I'll always see women say, oh, I go to the store, I'm in, I got my hair up in a bun, I'm wearing a sweater and I'm wearing baggy pants and stuff like that. And men approach me all the time. But when I go out and I'm all dressed up and I have everything done up, no one approaches me. And then all the guys usually in the response section will say, yeah, because when we see you with your hair up in a bun and we see you dressed like that and we still find you attractive, we see, like, from what we understand, this is the truest version of you and we like it and we still like it. So, of course, we're going to approach you then because we're seeing you as you, not the facade you're trying to show to the world.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's when you're not trying that people look at you because they want to
Right.
see what you're
'Cause
like normally, not your best face that you're putting forward.
yeah, because the best face thing is all about how you're trying to influence other people's view of you,
Right.
whereas the sweatpants and baggy shirt are you just minding your own business and doing your own thing and not worrying about how other people see you. And that's another really good illustration of do your own thing, do it your own way, and the rest can take care of itself. Because you know what? None of us are big enough to deal with everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we're here to offer assistance when it's required, when it's sought, when it's welcomed, not when it isn't.
Mhm.
And that's it. And that's all we can do. That's all any of us can do. But meanwhile, our main work is actually to work on ourselves. That's everybody's main work. It's not, here's another thing that society kind of screws up is the whole you're being selfish, you're being self-centered. Ah, there's a good.
Yeah.
You're being self-centered, like that's a bad thing. What
Mhm.
else are you supposed to be? Like,
Yeah.
how can you operate in the world if not from your own center? Like you kind of have to, right? It's like taking a day off is selfish, or choosing not to do work that other people think you need to be doing is self-centered. Well, okay, why? Like, why is it bad? But
Mm.
why is this a judgment? And it's another thing that I get very curious about is why are you worried about what I'm doing?
Right.
It makes no difference to you whatsoever if I decide to go take a 2 hour nap or if I decide to write an essay. It
Right.
makes no difference whatsoever. So why do you care? Why are you busy judging me and not looking at yourself? These are some interesting questions that,
Hmm.
yeah, I do actually think like that during the day. Yes, these are real thoughts.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something that I try not to inflict on anybody else. It's like if you're taking some rest, for example, then it's because you need it, and
Yeah.
it's not my business anyway. I don't have to judge that. And that's that difference. I can understand that you might want to rest. I don't have to judge why.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I was taking religion in school, and one of the big things is when it came to Buddhism, we had to do a bunch of skits with different religions, and the people who did Buddhism, the way they handled it was basically making them indifferent to everything in the world, which is not really what Buddhism is about. Like,
Not
it's not
even
about being
close.
indifferent to the world. And that's kind of what I'm saying here. Is like because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, yes, this is totally true. This is all totally true. But someone who hasn't done the work or who hasn't looked into things very deeply is going to think still, oh, isn't that all being selfish? You know, like, but you take the rest because your body needs the rest. But it doesn't mean that once you're rested, you can't go and help someone else do something, or it doesn't mean you can't help someone else with their problem. It's just that you do have to look after yourself because you're you. Like, you're the one taking care of you. No one else is. Even if someone, like, brings you into their house and clothes you and feeds you, they're still not taking care of you in the way that all the ways that you need to be taken care of. It's still only you, the person, in your body can take care of you
Yeah.
in the end. So you're not being indifferent to anyone else. That's what we want to get at is like, when people take care of themselves, people think that person's being indifferent to everyone else.
And it's a false equivalency,
Right.
right? It does not mean that, but we have lost. the art as a society of sort of arguing in a straight line, if you will. We bring emotion to a rational party. We bring these false equivalents of, well, if you're doing that, therefore this. And it's like, whoa, those don't go together at all. You know, if you're building a strong foundation by looking after yourself, that means that you are more likely to be able to help others because you're coming from a strong place. You know, it's
Hmm.
like the whole concept on an airplane of you put your kid's mask on first. No, you put your mask
You
on
put your own
first
mask
before
on
your
first.
kid.
Yeah.
Exactly the other way around, right? Because you would think, oh no, I have to look after my children first, but then you're dead, so how did that help? You know, like, no, that's not how it works. You have to look after you first. And you're the only person that's constant in your life from day one to day
Hmm.
zero, right? Nobody else is as constant. So if you're not looking after you, who do you think is? My curiosity is more when a person has that narrative running,
Hmm.
take a seat for a minute and just stop and think, where did that come from and why are you still using it? Because if you're using it against other people like that, then chances are you do it to yourself, which means you don't allow yourself to rest, to recuperate, to take a break. You don't allow yourself to live your life. You're too busy trying to live other people's preferences for you.
Yes.
But that's not how it works. You cannot do that. It's very rare that what other people want for you is actually what you want for you. Doesn't usually work that way. They're not operating from your space. They have a different lens, they have different reasons for it, and it's not them. You know, one of the things that I try and help parents with is the understanding that, look, your child's path is not going to look how you envisage, whatever that is. They have their own things to work on, and success is you being there to help them with it, right? You being there to encourage, not you being there to redirect. You know, when as parents we try and step in and say, no, 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 you don't want to do that. You got to go over here and do this thing instead. What happens is your child ends up spending time doing something they probably hate, they're not as well suited to, and it's not really what they're here for. Their human design would be screaming about this because you've shoved them in a direction that makes sense to you through your life experience and your lens, but you didn't give them that luxury. The Buddha did not say, these rules are for parents. The Buddha said, you know, take the teaching, measure it by your life experience, and see if you find it to be good. Allow your child to do that too, because they'll figure out their path. And this is when kids will take off and learn things and do things that you don't even know exist yet. They
Yep.
create new things when you give them space. So you need to be able to do that for yourself as well, right? And when we keep ourselves in this imaginary box that we think other people want us in, you're in a whole pile of no right there. That's just a whole lot of this is not you
Right.
authentically living your life. So why would you choose that? And if you wouldn't choose it, stop choosing it. Don't
You
keep
know,
doing it.
yeah. It's funny because it makes me think like, one of the big things we both have in common on this podcast is that we both don't suggest people, go into religion. But we do add the caveat of, but if you can do it, we're not going to stop you. Choose, take your lessons from that thing. Maybe don't stop there, but continue. But we never stop anyone from that kind of stuff. We just say, if you're going to do it, just learn what you can from it.
If it's your happy
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
but is it?
Yeah. Well, it's just to remind the people, like, because sometimes when we talk, it's like, it sounds like we're being authorities on this and telling people what we have to do. But all we're doing is really giving you the fundamentals of how to do things for yourself. Go on, take what we taught you, and then do whatever it is you want to do with it. Go learn whatever it is you want to learn. Go explore whatever you want to explore. We're just giving you it's like we're just teaching you how to walk. That's it. What you do, where you go, once you know how to walk, and how you choose to walk after you understand the mechanics. Whatever, that's you.
And it's our understanding of how to walk,
Yes.
right? Like I offer suggestions based on my learning,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of it's from experience. Most of it's probably from
Mm.
experience. I do have the technical stuff as well, but that's secondary. It really is secondary. Um, but does that mean that everybody hears me and wants to take it? No. One of the things I worked on with my mom for some time
Hmm.
before she died last year was she used to give advice, and it was really good advice very often, not
Hmm.
always, but very often, really good advice. But then she would worry about it and fret about it and chase after the recipient of the advice until they did the thing, right? She would be very concerned that they had to follow her advice.
Yeah,
And it took me a while, but I finally got her to understand that I've said this before and I'll keep saying it. Advice is like a gift. Once you've given it, it's not yours anymore.
that's right.
Let it go. It's not up to you to decide what they do with it. You did your bit. Now leave it alone. And when she started doing that, which was like in her last year, I guess,
Hmm.
um, the relief was palpable. She was just so sort of, oh, yeah, that is a lot better. Oh, good. Like she was so happy that she didn't have to keep chasing after people
Yeah.
to do what she was suggesting for them because you can't control that part. You cannot. So
No.
if you have stories about this stuff, my invitation is this is a great place for you to stop and look and decide, do you want to keep going with that story? Is it working for you? Really? And if it is, will it still work for you if you don't get to put it onto other people? Ooh, there's a good
Yeah.
one. Like if you can't beat other people up with the same thing you beat yourself up with,
Yeah.
do you still like it? And if somebody took that away from you, these are different perspectives to think about. If somebody took that away from you so you couldn't, accuse somebody else of being lazy, for example, the only person you could ever say that about was yourself. Would that still be interesting?
No.
Yeah, I'd like to think not, because
Yeah.
it's not helpful. I'm here to blow cobwebs out of the way and to kind of clear some paths with my machete because I can be as subtle as that sometimes. And
Mm.
clear some
Well,
paths so you can see the way and then choose what you do with that.
what's the thing, right? Like that's why I keep saying for 2025, if you haven't done it, learn to be true to who you are because you never know when who you are is going to be the thing that solves the problem or elevates the situation or whatever it is you want to say. You don't know because you can't know until you're in that situation. So you might as well be who you are all the as best as you can. Like,
You
there's a
might even
your
like
life's in
yourself.
danger. It's up to you if you want to be a martyr to the cause or you want to survive for another day. It's up to you. But as a general rule, be yourself.
Yeah, you might even like yourself.
Yeah. And
There's
if
a
people run
thought.
away, that makes room for people who love you for who you are.
People run away, then they have their own shadow work to do. But I
That's
mean,
right.
we all do, right? So that again, that's nothing you can control. So it makes no difference. Don't spend time on it. Don't spend energy on it. And I talk about wasting energy a lot
Mm.
because, well, I'm very keenly aware that we only have so much and we only have so much time. And if you're exhausted because you've been shedding your energy all over the place and giving it to people that don't even notice, uh, wow, what's left for you at the end of the day? Is that the best use of your time here? We're on this planet for a while. We
Mm.
have we're spirits with a meat suit that
Yes.
is accessing all the physical things on the planet
Mhm.
that we access, right? That's how we learn about the environment we're in. So my view of it is you're here to learn some things and take that information with you when you go because it's the only thing that goes with you when you go.
Right.
And like that's it. So are you doing that or no? If you don't perceive life as that way, okay, explore the way you do see it. And what does that need from you? How can you live that the best way?
Mm.
But I'm going to say if it involves following other people's rules about what's good and what isn't, that's faulty from the get-go because it's other people's rules. So it's not about you. It's to you, but it's not about you.
Yeah. I always like that line. It's both good and bad. It's not about you. That means that when you can't handle it, don't worry. It's not about you. You can go relax somewhere.
Right? But I mean, those rules, I'm thinking religion
Mm.
now when I'm talking
Yeah.
about rules, but rules are designed to control people.
Yeah.
They have you behave a certain way. But, if you're only behaving like a quote unquote good person because of the rules you're following, then you're not being very good, right? You're just following rules. If if you can't behave in a moral, ethical, civil kind of
Mhm.
way without rules, then boy, you really do have some work to do.
Yeah,
And that's a great place to start. Please get going because
yeah.
there's a lot of personality development you need to do,
Well,
right?
that's the thing, right? If you can't be a good person without the threat of eternal damnation, maybe you're not a good person.
Right.
Yes, and you
Well,
really should work on that.
but by definition, not, right?
Yeah.
'Cause you have to have the stick, the threat
Hmm.
of, fire and brimstone and all the rest of it in order to behave. Well, whew, holy smokes, what are you sitting on? Like,
Yeah.
how badly do you want to behave exactly if you have to have all those rules? And if you're in a religion that doesn't allow you to question anything, okay, I'm just going to leave that one where it went. But are you okay with not being able to question things?
Yeah. And we should probably there's a difference between not being in a place to understand something versus not being able to question something. Like, because sometimes you can be like, when you're dealing with your kids, sometimes you don't have the means to explain it to them at the time, but you need them to do something. That's not bad. It's not evil. It's just that, okay. And when the kid's older, they can learn. That's different from you can't question things.
Yes.
Just like we said, there's a difference between a gatekeeper and an intermediary.
Yes. Another excellent example. Yes.
And that's our basic warning about religion, right? It's the if it gets in the way of you actually connecting to, like I said, connecting to the spirit you're trying to connect with through that religion, then that's not a religion for you. It shouldn't be a religion for you unless you've got some work that you need to do. That's up to you. Like, right? Because again, right, we're not here to tell you how to behave, what to do, and who you are. If that situation that you need to be put in that containment, or then
Mhm.
that's you what you need, and it'll teach you what it needs to teach you. That's why we never say don't do religion. We're just saying take it for its value and move on.
There's some things to consider when you look at the religion you're in, though. And that's what we're talking about here with the can you question things?
Mm,
Can you seek alternative answers to what they're telling you is
mm,
true? Because, if they tell you, well, there's one way and this is it, okay, that's clearly untrue. Nothing is one way and nothing is it. There's always other possibilities, there's other angles. And it doesn't mean that one thing is incorrect, but what else is true? There's more than
mm.
one truth, right? If you can't ask for different perspectives, if you can't ask for the validity of something sometimes, because maybe the rule seems rather archaic or
Right,
patriarchal, for example, then, if you can't question that, are you in the religion or are you enslaved to it? Here
right,
are some questions to consider. If you've chosen it and you like it and you've studied it and you've asked your questions, cool. Then maybe you're in the right place for you and that is a path for your development.
right,
But if you're not allowed to be who you are in your religion, then is it really your religion or is it one that you've gotten trapped into?
right.
And there's a difference. There's a difference. Like some people choose religion and they are so happy with it because it answers certain needs and they have awareness. Cool. Enjoy. This is awesome. But, if you're there because you have to be, eek.
Well, that's the thing, right? That's how most people end up leaving a religion when they decide to take it on their own without being forced to. Usually that leads to people leaving. I mean, it did for me. Was that when I decided to throw myself into religion and go, okay, you know what? I'm an adult. Was Catholic, so I did my confirmation. I said I'm going to do this. All right. So I started showing up even when no one else showed up. And I got all the accolades for showing up as a teenager by myself, even when my parents didn't show up, and showing up and doing whatever. And then after a while of listening, it's like, yeah, no, this isn't for me. I like the whole sense of society, and people, all the accolades and stuff. But it was like I've listened and no,
Right.
you know,
And that's the thing is
right,
being able to do that and think critically about the situation you're in. What needs does it fulfill? And typically it's a need to belong is the
yes,
first one. And religions and cults, especially, are excellent at
yeah,
nailing that. They get your weakness, your insecurity, and your need to belong, and they nail it. They absolutely
Mm,
have it as, come here, we love you, you're part of
yeah.
us, and we'll all be one big happy family. And you get the thing that you are desperately in search of. But is it real?
Mm.
Well,
Well,
many
that's the
people
thing.
find out that no, it isn't, but it works for a while. However, you end up with bigger wounds than the ones you went in with. So if you're in it, first of all, you're probably not listening to this podcast, but if you've been in it, know that, it's fully understandable that you would find yourself there. Many young people end up in cults and so on because they desperately want to belong. Um, and that's a normal, basic human instinct. But
Right.
it's
Well,
just
that's
unfortunate that they're there with a big fishing net to scoop you up.
yeah. Well, that's the thing about cults, right? Everyone pretty much are of the thing of, well, I'd never get caught in that. That's so stupid. And no, you're looking from the outside, but you haven't done any efforts. I brought it up on the show before, but there was a story of a guy who basically he ended up going to a meeting for a cult, and he just for fun to make fun of it. And he ended up being in it really deeply after a while. It was only near the end where he finally dawned on him. It was just about raising money, that he finally snapped after doing everything the cult had asked him to do. A part of him finally snapped and said, okay, no, this isn't working anymore. And he left. He ended up writing a book about it, but he was in it for years. But he went in with the attitude of, I can't fall for a cult. That's for, the weak minded and whatever. But usually when you start playing like that, it's because there's something you're missing. And that's the
Mhm.
vulnerability that the cult leaders usually see and they bring you in. Like it's the, I hate to word it this way, but you either have to be very low intelligence or very low mature intelligence where a cult meeting will bore you, and can't keep your interest, or you got to be have enough self-awareness that you don't fall for the tactics. But that leaves a big gap of people, which is why I say it's truly important to know who you are, because not knowing who you are is what makes you vulnerable.
Ooh, mic drop. Boom.
Yeah,
Right there. That's like, okay, let's just underline that one for a minute.
yeah.
Not knowing who you are is what makes you vulnerable.
Hmm.
That's a mic drop.
Because one of my big lessons or one of the big philosophies I take in life is the look at what evil people do and then distill those techniques and then use them for good. Because the manipulation that people usually go through is the first time someone manipulates you, they're telling you about how awesome you are and they're telling you how valuable you are, and they'll do things to show you that. And that's what brings you in. When you look at someone who's from the male perspective, if you look at a guy who's a serial womanizer, you know, that's what they do. They make women feel valued. They make women feel like they're the only thing in the world that matters. And they cement that feeling so that the person expects it when they see that person. So their brain reacts to that person with that, oh, they really love me. And then it's after they know they had that reaction that they then start doing the abusive behavior, or they then start using the person. But if you take that beginning understanding and apply it without going into the abusive part, then you've learned what it's like to actually make someone feel adored, or to actually bring someone to help themselves instead of making a victim out of them.
That's a very interesting breakdown. And yeah, yeah, that is exactly how it rolls, where, it's all the flattery and the
Mm-hmm.
you're the only person in the world and I hear every word you're saying, etc., to reality, which is not the same thing. And that person has also learned that behavior. They have learned how to do that from their own environment. So,
Right.
does it excuse them? Again, let's get away from the blame and shame discussion. That's not the point. It's the understanding that that's where they came from. It doesn't mean you have to put up with it. Doesn't mean you have to stay there. It just means, okay, I see this. That's not for me. I'm out of here, right? That's another way to look at that situation. But to get stuck in it because, well, it wasn't like that in the beginning, so I'm sure it'll be better soon. There's your loop
Yes.
right there. You're in your loop. That's you are waiting and you are allowing the behavior to continue. It's your chance to step out of the loop. There's there's loops everywhere. Like our lives are like slinkies. You know, there are circles and circles and circles. And if you're
Yeah.
not careful, you'll be going down the stairs. You know, it's like you got to watch what you're doing with your slinky and maybe cut a few of those coils
Yeah.
and choose to be aware and not judgmental. Not of them, not of you, because it sidetracks. It's a
Yeah,
distraction.
and the honest reality is just like with forgiveness, right? Once you now have an understanding of why you fell for the things you fell for, or why that person was able to do to you the things you do, you don't care about blame. You don't care about all those things because you're now secure in who you are. You're now know you have strategies of how to deal with a new situation. You know what makes you vulnerable. So the fact that someone was to blame for something doesn't even matter to you anymore, in all honesty.
Well, you can now recognize the
Yeah,
signals moving forward, and they're not likely to attract you anymore.
yeah.
That's the other thing. So, people who end up in, well, I had this relationship, and then this one was just the same, and then that one was just the same. Okay, here we have this very familiar loop. Why are you choosing the same person in different bodies? Like, what is it about that person that attracts you? And usually they remind you of someone.
Yeah.
There's things about what they do that remind you of your childhood. Maybe you had a dysfunctional parent that this person reminds you of. Consciously, that doesn't
Right.
make sense. Consciously, you wouldn't choose that. Subconsciously, 100% you are going for the familiar.
Hmm.
That's what the subconscious does. It doesn't judge good, bad, right, wrong.
Right.
It just gives you what you're familiar with. So if that relationship is familiar, that's why you keep getting it. So now the key is to recognize the aspects that draw you in so you don't
Hmm.
have to be drawn in by them anymore. You could change that. You change that narrative. This is where your power is. And then the whole thing of blame or forgiveness or any of it is like it's completely immaterial. I'm going to be a little, just a smidge controversial here and
All
say
right.
forgiveness is for people who haven't understood the assignment. You haven't
Mm.
dealt with it and moved on. If you're still talking forgiveness, then you're still in that
Yeah.
association. You're still attached to that story because you're still feeding it energy. Stop
Well,
it already. Stop it already.
to continue the controversy, if you have to make a post on Facebook that says you're 40 years sober, you're not.
Right. Because boy, you're counting for a
Yeah.
kickoff. But yeah, you've been waiting for all that time. You've been biding your time. You've
Yes.
been doing something else to distract yourself, etc. And again, this isn't for us to judge. It's for you to understand, like on different levels, how am I showing up? But
Yeah.
that whole forgiveness thing, it's like, yeah, that's like an umbilical cord that's attaching you to that event or those people or that person,
Mm.
and you keep feeding it. Like, leave it, stop it.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Because like I've been invited to all kinds of sobriety groups for some reason, and I've accepted the invitations. So and I listen to people all the time, and I'm like, after 35 years of being sober, you'd think that it would be in your past at some point if you really got rid of it.
Well, it's interesting though that the community has then become the support, the belonging
Hmm.
group, right? It's a cult, it's a religion. It's a thing
Well,
that's
it's
taken that space.
12-step programs are based on religious principles, so.
Oh, they are, yeah. I went to a 12-step meeting as part of a nursing assignment.
Mm.
It was fascinating to listen to. Just fascinating. One or two of the guys came up with some really good strategies for things, and I've taken a couple of them on. Like, I like it. One
Hmm.
had a thing about to-do lists, and he said, if it's not done on the day you write it on the list, then
Mm.
move it to the next day, and you do
Yeah.
it for 3 days. And if you still haven't done it, take it off your list because you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, I like that. That would shorten my list.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, to say the bonus of these programs is I was listening to one person today it was unrelated, but the person was a recovering addict. And one of the things she mentioned was that, you know, because she was talking about like having political fights at holidays because, the time of the year. She was saying like, well, one, have an exit strategy. Two, be helpful. Like if you know there's going to be people there you're going to argue with, do the dishes, help with the dishes. help
Right?
with the because that's some those are things you do when you first come back into your life when you're sober and you want to avoid being caught with the temptations of drinking. So you either when everyone starts to drink, leave the room, go help do the dishes, or go play with the kids, or go or have an exit strategy to get out. You know,
Hmm.
and these are like and yes, these come from 12-step programs, and they're infinitely like she brought it into another context and said, here, this is for getting sober, but guess what? This works in this situation as well.
Nicely done. See, there's some
Yeah,
good value right there. I like it. Yeah. No, that there's not to say nothing's black and white, right?
right.
Like even when it's religions or it's 12-step
Hmm.
program or whatever, it's not all good. It's not all bad,
Right.
but it's what you take from it. The
Hmm.
key is to keep moving. Don't get stuck in one spot. Keep moving.
Right. Well, that's the
Keep
thing, right?
looking
And we do
forward.
do this. We do this a lot on the podcast, right? Like we'll make a statement and then we'll go, okay, now here's some good stuff about it, just so
Yeah,
you're
because
not
nothing's
avoiding
all
you from
good or
doing
all
things.
bad.
Yeah.
Nothing's all good or all bad, right? Like, okay, he's a smidge controversial,
Right.
especially coming from me, but let's look at Hitler for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, let's go there. So, evil, right?
Hmm.
Terrible. All the bad things. Yes, except no, that's not true. Because, for example, I have a great aunt who
Hmm.
was born in the same village as Hitler in
That's
Austria. And he sent medical supplies when they had a winter that was so bad she got frostbitten toes. And
oh
she
yeah.
was a little kid at the time. Like he looked after his village, he sent
Mm.
them stuff. So to those people, was he evil? They didn't see that. They
Right.
saw a guy who left home, made good, and sent stuff
Hmm.
back,
Yeah.
right? What, okay, so now you look at what he did with the Holocaust. Was that
Hmm.
evil? Well, of course it was.
Hmm.
But you can still look and say, he was genius the way he made it happen, though. How do you take people? Well, okay, prior to the last 12 months, I would have asked this question. How do you take people who are rational and have them do things like that?
Hmm.
Well, he had a system, right? He othered the people that
Hmm.
were going to be murdered en masse,
Hmm.
and he took the job that
Hmm.
was that process, and he split it up so that people were only counting wedding rings or they were just counting numbers. They had a small part to do that, when
Hmm.
it added to the whole, resulted in a Holocaust. But individually, everybody could rationalize it away.
Yeah.
Now, that was genius. Like, it was absolute genius. When you look at the guy himself, he was a misbegotten runt of a man,
Hmm.
by crikey, he could speak. Like
Yeah.
he was charismatic and he got everybody on his side,
Hmm.
right? So, am I saying he was a good guy? No. Am I saying that certain things went well?
Hmm.
Yes. It doesn't mean I like it, but that's what happened. But from my great aunt's village, they
Right.
thought he was wonderful. And, because he sent medical supplies and food to their village when they were suffering. Okay, that's their perspective.
Well, yeah. See, so this is what I mean by learning from even from evil people. Because now think of all the good you could do if you were able to get to to mobilize that many people. So the
Right?
technique of just having people do small tasks, okay, well, we'll have all these people do small tasks, and that'll lead to a bigger task that'll be helpful. But that
Right.
same techniques that he used to do something really bad could have been used to do something really good.
Exactly. So it's like separating out
Yes. Where
the
it goes wrong.
information. It's
Yeah.
separating out the information from this one thing. So, I'm never going to say Hitler was a good guy.
Yeah.
That's not certainly not coming from me. But there are things there that you can learn and take and use even. And there's a perspective that exists that I'm personally aware of that is not the same as everybody else's, which is that of my great aunt's village.
Right.
They didn't know what he was doing elsewhere because they were in this little isolated village, or fairly isolated at the
Mm.
time. And and they were suffering a brutal winter, etc., etc. So they knew their experience, which was not other people's experience. So, again, you only have your lens to come at.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you're right, and it doesn't mean that you're fully right. Because her village, they were right from their own perspective, but nobody else would hold that view.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because from what they knew, yeah, like it's
That
the
was their truth.
right. So this is why, again, Know yourself so you don't get fooled.
And stand on your own principles, like
Yeah.
not what other people are telling you, but it's just be aware that your view isn't the only view. So, because there's so much going on right now where everybody's yelling, it's this or you're wrong, it's that or you're wrong, you're too stupid to see this, you're too stupid to see that. No, it's just a different lens, and
Yeah.
there's really no point. You know what I would love, actually,
Mm.
thinking politics, because we always seem to go there at some point.
Yeah.
What I would love to have happen right now in politics is that everybody shuts the hell up, stops yelling about things,
Mm.
and actually look at what was my part in getting to where we are now.
Right.
What did I do? How did I contribute to? What perception did I have, along with others even, that led to where we are now? And what can we do from here? There's those two questions. One is how you got there, one is where you're going from there. But you gotta suspend that whole blame game and the
Yeah.
yelling because you wouldn't be here if, as the Buddha would put it, the causes and
Mm.
conditions weren't there.
Right.
Everything happens because of causes and conditions. So it didn't come out of a vacuum. It's not because half a country's stupid. It's because the whole country played into a particular story, a particular
Yeah.
pattern over a prolonged period of time. And repeatedly, I see cycles here that got us to where we are now. So, love it or hate it, we all had an input in that. And
Hmm.
the question is, what would you do differently now that you've discovered you had an input? And where would you like it to go next?
Yeah.
And hint, going backwards, back to the good old days, yada yada, doesn't exist, isn't going to happen. That's not how it works. So just like we're not going back to pre-COVID, we're not going back to pre anybody's time in office. We are always moving forward, like it or
Yeah.
not. So if everybody could just shut up and start with a little introspection and shadow work, I think we could get some good answers.
Well, that's the thing, right? Every time it's not, I will say this because I think about it every once in a while too, how we often come back to politics, even if it's not the
So
initial
big.
topic. But like, it's very important. And it's very important for the people who are listening because if you share this podcast or you just take the lessons yourself and internalize them, you start to notice how not being yourself causes problems and trying to belong to groups without being yourself and being afraid to be
Yes.
yourself. Because, like, okay, I've said before, I consider myself a filthy leftist liberal, but my whole premise is freedom above. The liberal part of me is about freedom before everything else. But part of being a leftist is you got to take responsibility for what you're doing, how you're affecting the whole, because that's where the tyrant comes in. But I've listened. Because I wanted to have all the information, the proper information, and find where I am missing information. I'll go to a lot of right wing, conservative right wing stuff because that's the opposite of where I am. Just for people's reference, you can be left wing and you can be liberal or conservative, and you can be right wing and liberal and conservative. It's just how you go about enacting those policies. So I go to the opposite scale of right wing conservative. And for a party that's right now considering itself the champion of free speech and acceptance, just like the complaint with the left, the hatred there is palpable, but it's because people are in their own bubble and they don't realize people outside that bubble are looking. Because when I go and I get into the deep ones, the accusation of libtard liberals are the equivalent of pedophiles and blah blah blah, and the hatred is there, and the desire to censor everyone is there. It's all there, just like it is
Mhm.
on the left. Like there's no. It's just what you choose to censor, what you choose to be a fascist about, what you choose to hate. That's the only difference between the two sides. That's it. That's the only difference I
Exactly.
see.
Exactly. And, people, I've been noticing in the media that people who were on the side that did not get into office
Mm,
are busy yelling about every single step, every single move,
mm,
right? And then one move happens that's like, wait a minute, so and so got pardoned, huh? How did that work? Well,
Yeah.
then the same people are all about excusing that on the basis that that's about to
Mm.
happen with the other guys. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so principles be damned.
Hmm.
This is this is where we're going. I'm just looking at all of this as a very, very interested observer because what I'm seeing is that people aren't doing the shadow work, they aren't doing the
Right.
introspection, and they're not being honest with themselves. It's
Exactly
like,
it.
let's have a little of that. And also, the people you're yelling about, maybe you want to look at why they chose the way they chose. Why do they see you the way they see you? Now, you can't affect how somebody else sees you in that you can't determine that, but you can certainly understand where they may have got their opinion from, particularly when it's en masse, like with a
Mm.
political thing. And where are the areas of problem that you refuse to address?
Yeah.
I asked both sides, people on both sides, about the situation for Jews in North America right now because it's not safe. Why? Why is it not safe? This is ridiculous. These are citizens of these countries. Why are these people not safe? Do you think either side wanted to answer that? Not much. But if anybody was going to answer, it was the right, not the left. They just went quiet on it because it wasn't the narrative that they wanted. Okay, so if somebody listening here is on the left, I'm going to give you a little clue here and say that is precisely the kind of high handed behavior that alienated half the country. Not only that, but that's an example of. Now, for the right, they have their own agenda and they're going to push it through because they disrespect anybody that doesn't agree with it.
Right.
Okay, how did they get to that? Maybe there were some reforms that were pushed through at a pace that they couldn't handle. Maybe they weren't consulted enough with those. Was any consultation happening? I'm going to say no. The only consultation that happens is with the party in power. Well, that's guaranteed to alienate the other 50%, right? So both sides have been doing this for years. This has been building for a very long time. And it's because neither side is paying attention to the other side.
Right.
It's
And just
about
a,
superiority rather than collaboration.
and just a reminder to the Canadian listeners, it's happening in Canada too. So don't be
Oh,
too
yeah.
comfortable or too prideful about any kind of superiority here because it ain't there.
Oh, no, I'm watching you guys, and it's the
Yeah.
same thing on a smaller scale
Mm. That's
because
right.
it's
We're just a
people.
smaller demographic and we don't have as many our controversies aren't as televised, but they're still there.
I was going to say they might not be as obvious, but they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but each side is very cocooned in their own viewpoint. And God forbid you should ask questions about that and sort of say, well, hey, what's your view on this? Why aren't you talking about this? Where's your stance? And they don't like it. They
Yeah.
don't like it at all because it's
Well,
not their narrative. But if you can't address that, why do you think you can be in power?
yeah. Well, I'll kind of just a reminder to my fellow Canadians that if you're not familiar with this term, look it up. But it's called a starlight walk. I think that's the name of it. Look it up. And if you find out what it means, put it in the comments or start thinking about making Canada a better place. Now, I'm not going to make you have to read. I'm going to tell you what it is. This is a practice in certain jurisdictions where when natives come into town off the reserve, the police will drive them out of town, usually on a cold winter night, and make them walk back. So, as you might guess, people die,
They still do that now?
as far as I know.
Wow. Wild.
Yeah. So, when I say Canada is not the perfect place everyone likes to talk about it, it's a thing. Now, is it written in law somewhere that you have to do this? No. This is certain bad actors, although enough of them to get on the news, and for it to be known as a thing, you know, but it's a thing that still happens. It's the we didn't kill them, we just left them, so it's their fault for not calling home, or but they might not have a
Right.
phone, and we don't know if the phone it's confiscated, and we don't know all those things.
Wow.
But these are
In
things
any
that
case, the
exist,
intention is not helpful, it's
right?
harmful.
And it's little things like that that if you talk about it, people won't think on the first part that there's something malicious. Like I'm not saying there's a rot necessarily. I'm not saying there's rules written that it has to happen that way. What I'm saying is these are the unwritten rules that happen that still exist that cause problems. This is why when someone comes from a minority group and they say, I feel discriminated against or I feel like people are working against me, it's because it's not that there's written rules. Some places do have written rules where they do weird things. I think it was like red zoning districts or something like that. But anyways, like there's unofficial things that people do which on their surface seem innocuous or not bad at all, like dropping someone off to walk home, but you're dropping them off in freezing temperatures and letting them walk home. Especially like, if they're drunk, so their body's not the normal mechanism of protecting the internal organs is not in play because alcohol circulates the heat through the whole body. So you're looking at getting more damage and more fatalities, even if that's not because people can end up walking home and surviving. It's not that just because you get put on that Starlight Walk that you die, but you can.
Well, your chances are obviously
Yeah.
increased.
Yes.
And even, to kind of follow that thread sort
Mm.
of, I saw an interview the other day with some people who were demonstrating for
Right.
native rights,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in Canada, and they were talking about Indigenous rights and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And this interviewer was asking them about that, and they were very willing to talk. And then he switched to Indigenous people of Israel,
Right.
right? And interesting how the same people suddenly backed off. They didn't want to know
Oh,
about that. One person
absolutely.
pretended to have a phone call. It was hilarious. It was very Canadian, right?
Yeah.
This is uncomfortable. I'm going to pretend to have a phone call and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
But others were saying, well, and they were saying things that were clearly misinformed, but they had also gone into that box of we'll look at this, but we won't look at that. Generalizing from here to here doesn't make you weaker. It potentially makes you stronger because, hey, there's a whole bunch of allies just waiting for connection, right? But
Well, yes,
to me, it
absolutely.
was it was interesting that we more isolation, right? More
Mm-hmm.
examples of isolation. Let's keep this group from this group, and it was just interesting to see the bewilderment on some of these people's faces.
Well,
They were like, parallels were drawn with, okay, but the indigenous rights of these people
mm-hmm.
have been completely denied. And for anybody listening, I'm talking Israel here. Okay.
Right.
Israelis have a right to Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and their rights are being denied by so many people. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
there's another group that's arguing for the same thing only in Canada. It's like, no, actually, you're on the same side.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's a phenomenon, and this is one of the reasons why we did an episode on the victimization or the weaponization of victimization, because you can be in one group that's victimized, and there can be other groups that are victimized, but you don't see past your own victimization to see the common things you have. And I've seen this across groups. This my own personal beef, right, with French Canadians. It's like, okay, we came, we colonized, and then France lost the war, and then Britain came, and then the French colonies got colonized. But do you see French Canadians acting as going, oh, you know what, this really sucks, and acting as a gap between the natives and the British coming and Canada now? No. You got Louis Riel, but Louis Riel was of mixed race. He was native and he was French. He was a Métis, the whole starting of that tradition. So he did it, but because he was both. And frankly, a lot of French Canadians do have native ancestry. So we're perfectly sitting here to be a bridge between the two. But are we? No.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the French just sit down and go, "Oh, we're victimized by the English coming over." Okay, so then are you taking that lesson and applying it now to being better towards the indigenous people here? No. All right, well then, shut up. Like,
Yeah. No, it's an old narrative, and happy enough to take subsidies and what have you, but we're still going to complain about this. It's like there's things on different levels here that are problematic, right? But the concept of this group doesn't recognize that group, and yet there's so much in common. You have way more in common problem-wise, like, and looking for solutions than you could ever have realized because somehow there's this
well, that's the thing,
compartmentalization going on.
and that's again. where it's important to be true to who you are, because this doesn't just happen because everyone is being ignorant as well. Sometimes it happens because it's intentional. The system isn't
Mhm.
broken, it's meant to work that way.
Oh yeah.
So people are
Divide
then,
and conquer.
yeah. So it's the, oh, look, you don't have a lot of stuff. So, you better fight for your stuff because these people are going to take it from you, you know?
Uh-huh.
Actually, I seen a little comic the other day, and it was the king is giving an address, and his advisor is sitting beside him, and there's people in front of them. Right? One group had torches, and their group had pitchforks, and the advisor just goes, "Okay, now tell them the people with the pitchforks want to take away their torches."
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's politics in America,
yeah.
pretty much in a nutshell. And
Right.
I think Canada's kind of got a bunch of that going
Well,
on too.
we're a weird bunch, and every time we get someone like every party it's saying they're well-meaning usually ends up stoking division even more. Like I said, when I first voted was when the NDP came into power in Ontario, and I voted for that. And with their good intentions, they stoked so much division because they didn't let like one of the big things is they didn't let people time to assimilate with what they were trying to get people to do. They just ham-fisted jumped in
Yes.
to the
Yeah.
point of if you're a white English speaking Ontarian, don't bother applying for a government job. Okay, well, basically every minority group came out and said, do not put a law like that in place. What you're going to do is get the rest of us killed because we're not asking for that, but you're making it about that.
And that sort of thing has happened over here, right? There's a big backlash right now on the diversity, equity, and
Right?
inclusion thing. There are big companies that are already disbanding it, and Trump's not even in power yet. He will
Yeah,
be by the time this episode is out, I think. But
right.
they're doing it in advance of. So what that
Mm-hmm.
tells you is they've just been waiting for the
Yes.
opportunity, and they're like, "Yay, let's go! We can do this now." Why are they doing that? Because it's become too much. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a pendulum swinging, right? We went all the way over to let's have all the diversity, equity, and inclusion we can possibly stuff into things. And now that pendulum has peaked and it's
Right.
swinging back the other way. And now we're getting the backlash from that. And I'm not putting any judgment on any sides of those things. I'm
Right.
just saying this is how it's swinging. This is what we're seeing now. It's not a surprise when you don't involve people in the process and you don't modify as you go. If you've spent a couple of 100 years or however long your country's been around for,
Right.
depending on where you're listening from, if
Mm-hmm.
you spent all that time getting to where you are culturally, and you think you're going to switch that in 6 months or in a year,
Yeah.
no, it takes a little longer than that. And it takes some forethought and it takes a hell of a lot of collaboration. And if you're not getting that, then it's not got longevity about it. That is one of the things we're witnessing now. Do I like these changes? It doesn't matter. The point is they were inevitable.
Well, that's the thing. What's I going to say? So no, the wording for it is lost. So there had to be something different to it.
The thread went flowing away.
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah,
happens
but
sometimes.
yeah. But it was going to be basically about oh, this is what I was going to say. So I'm a big believer, like when you have any kind of media entertainment, especially, you should overrepresent minority groups. The basic reason, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, is that the minority gets a good view of the majority. And they see a variety of the majority. They get to see people act in different ways. So they know that not everyone necessarily in the majority is a certain way, right? Unless they
Mhm.
got like a really tight cluster and they're not allowed to see beyond. But what happens is it's not the same in reverse, right? When you're in the majority, you don't get to see as much of the minority. One, because there's less. That's why there's the minority. And there's a good chance that if you're in a minority, there's probably just a smaller number of diversity in that group. Or you're trying at least to keep the bonds of that group. So you tend to, we'll say, blend more, even if you don't feel like it, just to keep your unity, right? So the majority is not getting a good view of the minority the same way that the minority is getting of the majority. So when you over represent, then you get to see that diversity as the majority gets to see more diversity. So if someone has like TV shows where there's more gay people than you'd expect in the real world, or there's more people of different colors, or there's more people of different religions than you'd expect in that population, it's like it's fine. That's just because you don't get to see these people. So to kind of give them a chance in your world, you should at least get to see diversity amongst them so that you know they're not all the same people. So you can't, so your stereotypes can't. So you try to get rid of the stereotypes, by
or at
showing
least diffuse
diversity.
them a bit.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think what you're saying is an ideal,
Hmm.
but to get to that ideal,
Yes.
people need to know why,
Yes.
right? And they need to buy into what you're saying as why. They need to feel not threatened. And this is one of the problems with pushing the agenda the way it's been done over
Hmm.
here, is that the people who are on the alt-right have felt terribly threatened by this.
Yeah.
Absolutely threatened. And it doesn't matter if nobody else perceives it that way. They do. So, from their perspective, and they had a lot of voting power, it seems, from
Right.
their perspective, this was threatening. So, with some more communication and people paying attention to what the other side thinks, we could have had more understanding, a more acceptable pace to get to where we want to be. To have that space
Yeah.
where people who are underrepresented are visible
Hmm.
and understood better and given space to be who they are rather than, the majority muscling everybody else out.
Yeah.
But you got to have that understanding that this is this is a cool opportunity. It's not threatening. It's okay, we can do this, right? But you got to get everybody on that page, not just say, well, we think that way, screw you,
Yeah.
right? We think that way, you're wrong. And that's what's been happening. And that's why it's not working anymore. That's why it's about to blow up in a very big way. And there's going to be a big backlash because that's
Right.
how pendulums work, is they swing back the other way.
Yes.
It wasn't given enough foundation to be sustainable.
Yes. That's exactly it.
There was no strong foundation. And there still isn't one. And I don't know if there's going to be one. I'd love to think that part of the shift that's coming
Yeah.
is that maybe it's a forced issue. Maybe we do get a centrist party or something. Maybe we get a shift. But what's been happening hasn't been working for longer than I've been here. It hasn't been working, and now we see the evidence that it's not working. So seriously, people have to listen to each other's sides and
Yes.
reach an agreement. It's not going to go as fast as anybody wants. It
Right.
can't because there's so much diversity in the population to account
Hmm.
for.
Yeah.
And you got to have people feel safe before you start bringing new stuff in.
Yeah.
If they
Well,
feel threatened, they'll fight you.
yeah. Uh, to just kind of use the political idea here. So one of the big differences between liberals and conservatives is that liberals are usually early adopters and conservatives are usually late adopters. And this is why everything fails politically for the most part. Every new project where you try to make diversity and stuff is because the conservatives need time to see, yes, are we safe? What are we doing? Because conservatives have a very important role in society, and that's to maintain society.
Right.
Liberals can run around and add as many ideas as they like. And like I said, I'm a filthy leftist liberal, so I understand the idea of we run rampant and add all these new ideas and expect everyone to be on board with us. And it's like, no, they're not. You have to give them time to assimilate and assess and absorb. Like, and I'll give you this idea, right? Like, I used to be an early adopter for technology, but when it's expensive, so I'm like, how about I'll wait for a couple of iterations? So I started becoming not an early adopter anymore because I've seen enough as in terms of technology. Because it's like, oh, well, if I wait a year, there's going to be a way better version of this thing, so I'm not going to jump on it anymore. But that's conservatives basically in a nutshell. Is they take time to assimilate because they're basically the maintaining of the population is going to be on the conservative end because they're the ones who do the 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning working, doing the dirty jobs. Usually, you usually see a bunch more conservatives than liberals doing those jobs. So we kind of, if we were playing this game for success, we would do our best to get conservatives on board with any change you wanted to bring
100%.
and give them time
100%.
to absorb that information because they're thinking about a lot of things. Like usually, and again, as a liberal person, I'm saying we're looking for new. We're always looking for something new. That's the first thing. It's in our DNA, find new things to look and explore. So we're sometimes going to bring back stuff that's not useful, and it takes a conservative to go, whoa, relax there. This is going to cause some disruptions that we can't recover from necessarily. So you kind of got to listen to what conservatives are doing in that sense, you know?
And unfortunately,
Yeah.
over here, what's happened is the one group have brought in the new things and they've
Mm.
just blasted anybody that
Yeah.
disagrees and put them in place because they're right, damn it. And
Mm-hmm.
then the other side is saying, yeah, but no, there's problems here. We don't like the look of this and you can't do that. And this is a threat to us. And instead of saying, oh no, we don't want you to be threatened, let's
Mm-hmm.
sort this out so that you feel safe. And let's look at what are your concerns? Are they valid? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, could we ask that question? Like, is there some validity to your concern? Because clearly it's strong enough that you're presenting this. So let's have a look at it, right? But no, both sides have been completely ignoring the other side, just yelling that they're wrong and not paying attention. So we don't have an agreement. We don't have a collaboration. We don't have a center place where people are being listened to. And that's exactly why we have the discord that we have right now. And unless people shut up and start listening, the discord's going to get louder and louder until something happens so that they have to. But I'd really like it to be more voluntary than that and a little bit earlier than disaster requires, like that
Yeah.
would be really cool. But both sides have a point, and both
Mm.
sides have something to contribute, and both sides don't listen to the other side, and there's your problem. So, like, I see why we are where we are. At least I have a pretty good perspective that I'm happy with. I think
Mm.
it's fairly comprehensive. Of course, there's other opinions, but I've been spending time looking at this and
Right.
asking questions and so on, and that's what I've come up with. And you seem to be in the same space of, okay, we're just not listening and we're pushing these agendas.
Yeah.
And
Well, it was the first thing I noticed, right? In Ontario, when the NDP came in, there was there was a lot of dramatic stuff. And one of them was to save a bunch of jobs, right? We had the government instituted for the civil servants Ray days because after Bob Ray, the premier. So they
right,
lost 1 day of work per pay period. So they had every other Friday off, basically. Well, the unions didn't like that. So when they brought in the conservatives, well, a lot of those people who had 1 day off their paycheck now had no paycheck. So there was a lot of dramatic things. Like, so there were some good ideas in there, but it was just they were trying to push everything fast. They weren't leaving the conservative minded people time to adjust to the situation. And I understood it because they were talking about like we're going to give land back to indigenous people and we're going to do all this. And I'm reading the paper and it's like, okay, well, my family had that property for 200 years, and now you want me to just give it up. And so my first thing was, aha, now you understand. But then it's like but also because they understand, they don't want to give up their property, that they've taken care of for 200 years, and there's like multiple generations of memories and all that kind of stuff. Like, so there had to be time to at least allow them to. Oh, is it okay? Should we move? Should we see? Like, none of that was given an option. It was just and if you don't like it, you're a bigot, right?
exactly,
We're playing with again and again, and over and over again. It's like, no, you're not helping. These people have legitimate concerns. Like,
exactly. We have exactly the same thing on two sides of the border. It's
right,
it's the same process where no, 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 it's not okay to just run roughshod over somebody because you disagree with the way they're presenting their argument or you don't like what they're saying. Okay, and they don't like what you're saying. Does that make you better than them? I don't
right,
think so. It's like both sides have points and both sides need to be heard. And we're just not doing that these days. And then individuals, are making the mistake of allying themselves with one side or another, come hell or high water. And it's like, but
right,
is that really where you stand on all of the things? Or are you
right.
just willing to overlook some stuff in order to have others? It's again, it's that
Mhm.
pie, right? Like I can have this slice, but you can't have that. And it's just It's very confused right now, I think, and it's time to look differently.
Yeah.
And starting with knowing yourself
Yes, absolutely. Because
is
if
the
you know yourself,
foundation.
yeah, because then you can look at the idea of, okay, my family had this land for 200 years and we've, did whatever and have all these memories. Well, before that, these people had the land for thousands of years and they had their memories and all their stuff on it, and then they lost it through whatever means. Because again, there is no history without complication. Nothing is ever freely done, right? Nothing is ever one group is innocent and the other group, wasn't. There's always some mixed up. People betray each other. People sell each other out for a bigger slice of the pie for themselves. Like it happens. And
You cannot expect the people who've been there for 200 years to say, oh, shoot, okay, here you go, because now they're displaced. You
mhm,
can't expect the people who had a claim for all that time beforehand to say, oh, well, never mind.
yeah,
So there has to be another way. There has to be a very deep and long conversation, probably, between the parties on what are we doing with this? Where do we need to go moving forward? Because you can't go backwards. There's no
yeah,
place to go back to. What do? You go back 200 years or you go back
yeah.
500 years? Do you go back 50 years? Like, what do you go back to?
And then there's, because I'll use my own example, right? I am at once a third generation Danish Canadian and also an Indigenous Canadian. So if someone says go home, where do I go? Because that's
Oh,
not my only heritage. Then
I've
you've
lived
got
my
French,
entire
you've got
life.
German, and all these other things, and I think Scottish, and like, where do I
I've
go?
lived my entire life with that one.
Yeah,
I've
so,
been an expat since I was 6 months old. So,
yeah,
and I've lived in places where I've been told to go home, and I'm like,
right,
okay, which one? And
yeah,
how far back are we going? And are you paying for me? And like there's a lot of questions there, but
yeah,
it's a nonsense argument, honestly, because you can't do that. It's not where can you go back to? It's given the past, where will we go forward to?
that's right. And there's
That's what we
that's
got
what
to
I'm
do. And
making.
everybody's looking behind them, but you're gonna walk into a lamppost that way. It's
Yeah,
it's like you don't learn anything looking back. You have to understand that was there. It's all legit now, given that that is a thing. Where are you going? It's not where you've been, it's where are you going now?
yeah,
All sides acknowledged, all sides accepted as part of the solution. Now, what is it? And that
yeah.
has to happen in Canada. It has to
Mm,
happen in the US.
mm.
It has to happen, I think, all over the world, honestly. There's got to be a lot of reconciliation.
Well, that's the other one, right? Because the Anglo-Saxons are not the original inhabitants of the island. The Irish, the
Oh,
Scottish,
no, come on, don't even
they're not
start.
the original inhabitants of the island either.
Come on, man. Don't
The
even start
Japanese
with
are not the
Chris. We
original
have,
inhabitants of Japan.
look, we have so much history there. You can't even start on that one.
But that's the
That's
thing, right? There's
precisely you
that's
can.
exactly it, right?
It's
There's so
too
many
complicated.
now, so much time has passed, so many heritage has been entrenched in areas that it's hard to just blindly say, okay, you get out.
Or you can't. And where would they go to? And the
Yeah.
recipient country would say no anyway because they wouldn't recognize the claim. It's
Well, so
none of that.
another part of my heritage is that so going through my name, Dubois, we were kicked out of France. So
Right. It, it's
yeah,
one of those things where looking backwards is going to keep everybody entrenched in argument and it's not going to move anything forward in any of these places. That you just got to see like backwards in that you want to understand how you got where you are. But once you know that, it's then moving forward for the solution. Going back for a solution is impossible. It
yeah,
doesn't work because it can't work. You don't live there anymore. You're not in the past, you're in the now. So you can be informed by the past, but the solution has to be moving forward. And this is it's it's shadow work on a global scale, right? Like that shadow work big time. And then you've got your own individual, you've got your community, you've got all
yeah,
sorts of levels. Shadow work is everywhere. And nobody has a get out of shadow work free pass.
that's right.
It doesn't exist.
Nobody.
No. We all have it. Question is, what do you choose to take on and when? And how are you going to do that?
And I'll be honest, sometimes it's fun
Well,
if you're in the right frame of
ideally.
mind.
If you
Sometimes
come
it's
in
like
with
the
curiosity, if you
yeah,
come in with curiosity, it disarms an awful lot of negative space.
yeah. just to be gross about it. Sometimes it's like an old wound that got infected and you're going in and you're taking that pus out and it comes back here once in a while and you clean it and you work on it. There's that weird morbid feeling that people get sometimes. Those videos are popular, so of people, squishing zits and pulling stuff out of people that are gross. So, you could take that same morbid fascination with your shadow work too.
Well, you could do that. I prefer to leave the gross, but I was a nurse for years, so
Yeah.
I've seen enough gross to last a lifetime. Thank you.
Yeah.
But just if you go in with curiosity into
Yeah.
this, then there's no room for judgment and negativity. You can't do both. So, don't be afraid, be curious.
Yes. That's my advice for anyone, especially when they're having a spiritual awakening, is because if you want to go in with courage because you're brave, well, the spirit world will give you something to be afraid of so that you can grow that way. So go in with the curiosity so they'll give you stuff to be interested in.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. So we covered a lot of topics today.
We did. But you know what? Especially the last bit there that looked more like a rant than an actual thing. It's still about a reason to do shadow work because it gives you what happens when you don't look at those parts of you. Like we covered a lot of, okay, you're indigenous to this, like making all these changes and not realizing the value of the other is part of the shadow work you need to do. Because I
100%.
was thinking about it too while we were talking, because we're like 2.5 hours in, you
Hmm.
know, but but I've said this before, there's a common thread in this podcast. We might seem to run off and away from the topic, but we're just inspired by the topic, and some of those rants are relevant to the topic. Like I said, it's always because whenever I review, it's always like, oh, I see where that makes sense together.
Hmm.
Even if at the time when we're talking about it, it doesn't seem that way, but there's always a connection with our topic and the rant or the our tangents, if you will, that we go on.
Well, yeah, I think we went from personal to global and back
Yes.
again. And,
Well, and the value of
using
it.
and the value and the necessity of it, even.
Yes.
It's necessary. And the thing is, it's not ugly or scary unless you paint that picture for yourself. But I
Mm.
mean, really, it's an opportunity. Once you can see it, anything that you can see becomes an opportunity, right? So
Yeah.
instead of saying, "How did we get here? Why has it all gone so wrong? And why is half the country so stupid?" etc., etc. Instead of that narrative, which not only stagnates
Right.
your thinking, but it actually digs you in a hole, right?
Right.
Instead of going that path, it's like, oh, how did we get here? What can I see? Where can I bridge gaps? Like for
Yeah.
myself, with even one other person
Mm.
who has a political difference. Can I maybe do that? And I have a few friends who have different political views to me, and I will just ask them lots of questions, not in a kind of inquiry kind of way, but it's more when they say something that speaks to their political orientation, shall we say. I jump in with some curiosity there, like, well,
Yes.
how do you feel about that? How did that land for you? Huh, that's interesting. When did you feel that way? And I'll just ask some questions because I do want to understand how they got there. Like, how did
Well,
they?
and that's why it's important, right? Like I had shared that time I had an argument with someone. I shared it in the first season of the word martyr, and I was convinced that you had to die to be a martyr. And the other person's like, no, it's just someone who suffers for it. But my perspective of someone saying, oh, you're being a martyr is just an exaggeration of someone's plight. You know, they're like, oh, I could die. Like, this is so terrible. So I was viewed it that way. And the other person's like, no, just when you suffer for your cause, you're a martyr. And I was like, well, I don't think that. And then we kind of argued for 20 minutes. And I went like, you know what? Screw this. And I grabbed a dictionary and was like, oh, it is someone who suffers. So I kind of learned that just because I was passionately behind my answer and the other person was passionately behind their answer doesn't mean that, I was right in mind. They were right. So it's one of those things that kind of made me look at, okay, so I see that my passion can run away from me and it can make me blind to, accepting answers from someone else. So I started paying attention to what other people were doing to see why they, argue so passionately against me. Sometimes it's because they're putting on a good act and they want to persuade me, you know.
Uh,
Like I like listening to a debate, but in the end, debates are the only thing useful about a debate is to give you different ideas to ponder. But just because someone can argue better than you doesn't mean they're right.
Here's one of the interesting things. Okay, we
Okay.
definitely have to end this soon, but
Yes.
one of the interesting things about a person trying to persuade you that they're right and you're wrong is that typically they only need to do that really if they're not as secure as they'd like to be in their own stance. Like if you need to persuade somebody else to agree with you, then how much do you really believe in what you're saying? Now, there are some exceptions, of course.
Hmm.
If it's a life and death thing, and I can think of a situation that's ongoing that
Hmm.
definitely fits in that category, then it's really important to get your life-saving view across to as many people as possible.
Yes.
That's
Hmm.
a life and death thing. But in general arguments, general positions on things, if you're so sure, like for example, let's go for religion for a minute, because we do all the things.
Yes.
So if you're so sure that your religion is the right one, and you have the answers, and you got the path, and you're on your way to heaven, and all the things, why then really do you
Hmm.
have to persuade other people of the same thing? Now, the superficial answer is going to be because I have to save everybody, I
Yes.
have to help everybody get to heaven. But let's pull that argument out of the system for a minute. And really, why do you need to persuade somebody? It's because you're not that sure yourself, right? You don't have all the answers. So it's much better if they stop questioning and they just agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier, right? So that whole dynamic of needing to persuade somebody else that you're right is an interesting one, which is why
Hmm.
debate is so good if you can get a real one going.
Yes.
A real one, like
Hmm.
with real skills, not the not the nonsense we've seen in the last
I was gonna say I'm looking at
six
you monk
months.
debates.
Yeah, not the stuff we've seen in the last 6 months, but the actual real ones.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah. No, that's you know what? That's probably a good spot to end on. So just
and we've
remember,
had
even though
tons of
we went,
those.
yeah, even though we went a long time, everything is relevant because we went from the personal relevance to the global relevance of actually, doing your shadow work and how much not doing it can bring damage to the world globally.
Absolutely. It spreads
So,
like wildfire, that stuff.
and I was going to say we should come up with an assignment, but we gave one to ourselves. But I think this is one of these episodes where people can actually figure out their own assignment from it.
That we gave a ton. Like
Yeah.
there's so many jumping off places with this episode that, pick a thing, and even if you focus on awareness, raising your own awareness about that topic or about that situation, where do you see it happening? Where do you see it coming up? Where do you see it relevant? That alone is the big work because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So if you just
Yeah.
start there, that's really cool.
Your world will change ultimately for the better, even if in the beginning it seems for the worse, because there's nothing like feeling ostracized from your community because you've asked some questions. But
But what price is it that you're going to pay to stay part of the group if you know that from your perspective, it's just not real. It's not legit.
well, yeah, actually, you know what? That's one of the things. The reason you're asking questions is because you see something's because there's something you don't understand, or because we're not assigning blame. But if you want to look at it, you think something's wrong,
Right.
whether it be because you don't understand or whatever. But there's a reason why you're asking the question, so you might as well ask the question.
Yeah. Or maybe there's just really is an information gap and you'd like that filled. And sometimes people's responses really stay with you. I
Mm,
was doing religion A level in England,
mm,
and I asked a teacher why Jesus said, I don't know, XYZ here, and then 3 pages later, ABC. Completely opposite things, right? And
mm,
I couldn't wrap my head around, okay, why are we going in this direction over here and this direction over here? And I did not understand how that could be a thing within 3 pages. And you're supposed to believe both.
yeah.
And it was years later when I got the Buddha's version
Mm,
of, well, these people needed to hear this and those people
yes.
needed to hear that. And for each group of people, it was the right thing. Oh, thank you. But
Yeah.
at the time, what my teacher did was told me to stop asking stupid questions and kick me out of the class. So I remember vividly her doing that. And why did she
Yeah.
do it? Because she didn't have an answer. But
Well, again,
I wasn't trying to be disruptive. I saw
right.
a thing that didn't make sense to me given the information I had.
Well, it's not even as complicated as the Buddhist answer. To my understanding, the answer is each apostle had a different audience. So
Well,
yes,
there you go.
it works, but that's why sometimes the resurrection is mentioned and it's not mentioned, and sometimes why Jesus is literally the Son of God versus not literally being the Son of God, because it depends who you're talking to. The Romans and the Greeks like the whole idea of demigod, so that was the target. So that was the target. That's how the story was presented to them. It just depended on who the target was. So each apostle pretty much had their own targets to go out and talk to, their own audience to go talk to, and so the stories and the wording matched what would appeal to those targets or
Which
to their
is
target audience.
essentially what the Buddha's saying is
Yeah.
those guys needed that and those
Yes.
guys needed that. But I didn't know the bit about the different apostles, but she didn't have an answer for a subject she was teaching at a pretty high level. And I got called stupid for asking a question. So, if that
Yeah.
happens to you, dear listener, um, be aware you're in good company. and,
Yeah.
and that's probably where your greatest ever learning is going to come from. So don't be afraid. Be
That's right.
curious.
And the questions you ask might help someone else. This is the most important
Absolutely.
thing in learning is the questions you ask
Yeah,
can help other people.
absolutely. That's big part of communication, and that's what we're here for is, that's the thing we have that others don't. Let's use it properly.
That's right. And never believe us the first time we say it's time to wrap up.
Right. Absolutely not. I'll stop talking now.
All right. Can't see her, but Michaela's got her hand over her mouth so she can't talk. All right. So once again, I'm Daniel Dubois.
I'm Michaela Gaffin Sedone.
Until next time.
Until next time.